I'm Nick von Wackerbarth, and you're listening to the VonDubCast. If you don't want to listen to me gap in the intro and you want to skip right to the interview, skip about 8 minutes. But before you do, please consider doing one of these couple things that really helps out the show. Following the social medias for the VonDubCast, subscribing, and leaving a review. If you could do those things, that'd be awesome. Also, give me a subscription on the YouTube channel. That'd be great too. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 59 of the VonDubCast. This is a very special episode for myself. This is my second interview I got to do with a stand-up comedian. And for those of you that got to listen to the first one with Lars Callie, you will know just how much I value and love the art form that is stand-up comedy. And for years, I've wanted to have these types of conversations to get to ask these questions because stand-up comedy was kind of my in to where I found podcasting and found podcasts and just the change that had on my life. So for probably 4 or 5 years now, I've just been listening to thousands, probably tens of thousands of hours of stand-up comedians in depth on their podcasts and following their journey and seeing people at all different stages of their comedy journey, and had a million different questions. You guys know I'm a curious guy and I have questions for everybody, but when it's something I'm passionate about, those questions just build and build and build. So I had an amazing time talking to Todd today. Todd's a comedian out of Calgary, Alberta. I was made aware of him by my sister. Actually, she had seen him do stand-up somewhere, maybe out in BC a couple years ago, and she had said, "Oh, he's really funny." And she showed me his Instagram page, and I saw him, and he looked kind of young, and I was thinking, "Oh, maybe he must be a 4 or 5 year comic," because he didn't look much older than 26, 27, like under 30 for sure. And in comedy, it doesn't matter how funny you are. The funniest guy in the world it doesn't matter with stand-up. You need time, and we talk about this on the podcast, but you need time in the saddle to get to that point where your stand-up is hitting like those people that you see on TV. And usually they demarcate it as kind of at 10 years is the point. When you've been doing stand-up comedy for 10 years, that's when you really start to find it. And so I wasn't, if I'm honest, I wasn't expecting much from Todd when I first heard of him or whatever. And then I started listening to his stuff, and it was hysterical. I laughed so hard, and he was so in touch with his voice. It was so unique and wasn't hacky whatsoever. And I was just blown away. And on this podcast, he lets me know that he started at 18. So he's 29 now. He's been doing it over 10 years. Just like I said, that 10-year comic mark. And I truly believe that Todd is going to be a household name I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. You see what he's doing. He's following the perfect path. He's doing his highly edited Instagram videos, really getting people excited. I think he's doing all the right things. And I think it's going to be sooner rather than later that you're going to see him really blow up. And I was so excited to be able to have this conversation with him. Like I said, I had a million questions. I only got to maybe a quarter of the questions I have. So I'm hoping to have him on right away and have him back on to get to the rest of my questions. I think we got along really well. I'm hoping he felt the same way, but I had a really fun time recording this with him. And so I hope you guys can hear my passion, and I hope you guys can kind of come along with the journey. I hope it's not too deep into the stand-up comedy world, not too inside baseball for you, but I don't think it is. I think we really walked that line and talked about some other things. We talked about some old TV shows, some Judge Judy, some Gene Simmons Family Jewels, and kind of the way that TV has gone, and especially comedy and TV, and how you don't really get to see comedy like you get to see in comedy clubs on the screen anymore because of just where society's gone. It's too dangerous, I guess you would say. And they really nerf what they think of as comedy. So it's really hard to find something that's truly going to make you laugh out loud outside of a comedy club. But I have a feeling that that's going to be changing in the next couple of years, and people are going to wake up to what really truly funny people are out there, like Todd. Like the fact that somebody can be this funny, and not that, Todd's extremely successful and doing awesome, but with how funny he is and how talented he is, he's just scratching the surface of what he's going to see and what he deserves. And I'm so excited to be in on the ground floor of that and to help support him on his journey. And I hope that you guys get to come into this, because that's one of the coolest things with podcasting that I've seen is to hear somebody early on and see that talent, and then get to watch it progress and watch them see the highs and lows of their career. And when they do blow up, you get to take that journey with them. So I'm hoping that I can help bring some more people on that journey with Todd. And I think you can, if you listen to this and you see what I see and believe like I do that he's going to be something special, just watch him, follow him on Instagram, go see his live shows when they open up, and and it's a really fun experience. His podcast, Nessing Around, it's awesome. We talk about it on this podcast. He does shorter episodes, maybe like 20, 30 minutes, which for myself, I really like the long form. Anybody that's listened to any of these episodes has heard me probably go wax poetic about the power of long form. And I was a little bit iffy about that time frame, but he does it so well, and he releases them almost every day. So my big issue with shorter podcasts, I feel like I don't get enough. I feel like I'm always wanting more when those happen, but the fact that he puts out so many, I don't feel that at all. And they're so tight, and the laughs per minute are off the charts, and it's so unique to his voice. He's absolutely killing it. I love his podcast. It's so good. It's on Spotify. It's on all the regular things. It's called Nessing Around. Check that out for sure. He also did a podcast that's no longer running called Two Mirrors with another local Calgary comedian who's also from the episodes I heard really funny, and I loved that podcast. I went back and listened to probably the last 5 episodes they ever did, and it's always tough to dive into a podcast that's no longer running because it sucks because if you enjoy it, there's not much more that you're going to get out of it. I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll reunite in the future and we'll get more of that stuff. But even with that said, I'd say it's worth a listen. Even do a couple episodes, just pop in here and there and check that out. And then his comedy special, it's on Spotify and it's on his YouTube channel. It's called Working Comic, Todd Ness, and it is awesome. It is some real high level. Like I said, he's a 10-year comic and it shows. He had me howling. My girlfriend had to come check on me because she could hear me just laughing in this office, and I was watching it the night before we did this interview, and I was just so blown away. I think I tell him that on the podcast, but you guys have to go check it out right now. I mean, it's criminal. I went and looked at it on his YouTube channel just because I feel like that's the best way to support it. Brings people there. So maybe listen to this episode first, but then after that, go to his YouTube channel, Todd Ness, watch his stand-up special, subscribe, and I'm hoping that I'm going to look at the numbers right before I release this, and I want to see at least, 10, 20 people, 10 or 20 views added to that comedy special. It's audio only, so it's just something to listen to, so maybe on Spotify is a better place to go listen to it if you're in the car or something, but I'm telling you guys, I listen to a lot of comedy and it won't waste your time. You're going to get some laughs out of it. And like I said, I think he is something special, and I'm so grateful that he was able to come on. I'm grateful to him in the future for coming back on. I think I'm going to have him back on. And I just had an amazing time, laughed my ass off, and I hope you guys get that too. So sit back, relax, enjoy this episode. For me, everything's going well in my world. Really loving the support I've been getting from you guys on the podcast. Last couple episodes has been absolutely astounding. The downloads have been amazing. You guys really stepped it up. I don't know what happened, what changed here in the last couple weeks, but you guys, I just have to say thank you. It really means a lot to me, and I can feel a little extra pep in my step knowing that, and it really makes me excited to come bring more great episodes to you guys. So thank you. If you do enjoy this podcast, please share it with a friend. If you could give me a follow on all the social medias, that whole shindig, YouTube channel, subscribe. You guys know the gig. I've said it a million times now. And I'll see you on the next one. All right. Thanks, guys. All right. Welcome, everybody. Got a very special episode of the podcast. Anybody that's listened to any of my episodes knows how obsessed I am with stand-up comedy, and how excited I was to get my first stand-up comic on. And now I have an opportunity to get my second stand-up comic on. Thanks for being here, Todd.
It's great, man. It's always been a dream of mine to be, someone's number 2. So I really appreciate that.
Hey, well, you're the best damn number 2 in the country, I'd say.
Top 2, dude. Top 2.
There you go. That's all you need. That's all you need. Awesome. Well, I have a million fucking questions for you. I'm just, I had a pretty good list. And then over the last couple of days, I've just been crushing episodes of your podcast and your old podcast. And just, I think my pen almost ran out, which is all the stuff I wanted to ask you about. So hopefully I don't talk your ear off too much tonight, and you can still get to sleep tonight without all these questions running around in your head.
Okay, man, we'll try.
Awesome. So I figured I'd start out just kind of asking about how you got into comedy, but maybe before that, I just start with asking how comedy is right now with everything going on. Like I would probably call bullshit if you said you're not getting any comedy in, because what I know of comics, I'm sure you're finding somewhere to scratch that itch. But I don't know if there's any you can maybe say publicly that you're doing right now, or is it completely locked down?
Yeah. Like, are you talking about stand-up comedy specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's so interesting because when it first, obviously everything got shut down,
Hmm.
shows obviously got canceled,
Yeah.
live shows completely canceled
Hmm.
around this time last year. And at that time, I was still in the mode, like most comics, of let's figure out what we can do
Yeah.
as even a proxy for stand-up comedy.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of instantly people were doing Zoom shows. People
Yeah.
were doing like, comics are resourceful, man.
Hmm.
They'll figure out a way to
Yep.
plug a microphone and perform somewhere. So there was Zoom shows. There was like people were doing backyard
Hmm.
shows,
Hmm.
drive-in shows. So it was interesting to see the new types of performances and the ways comics figured out to keep going with stuff. And
Yeah.
so I think now that still is happening. So I think there's still some drive-in shows going on.
Yeah.
There's comics that I know that are my friends that are doing a bunch of Skype shows.
Yeah.
For me personally, I've given up fighting and trying to force doing live shows right
Yeah.
now, knowing that the end is in sight and we have the vaccine and everything.
Hmm.
I really pulled back probably about 2 months ago. And I just said, you know what? We're going to be back hopefully before the end of this year
Hmm.
to real shows. And I will just wait until we're back to real live comedy shows.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, direct my energy into other things like my podcast, that type of stuff. And
Hmm.
so, but yeah, for live performances right now, I mean, especially where we are, there's nothing.
There's
Everything's
nothing, hey?
completely shut down.
Yeah.
And then I think we might in a month get back to shows that have reduced capacity, that type of thing.
Hmm.
But yeah, man, I'm dreaming of the day that we can get back and you walk into a comedy club and it's like there's hundreds of people. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't had the feeling in so long. I almost forget how to miss it, but I know as soon as I feel it again,
Oh yeah.
it'll be like, oh, crazy, man. So
Yeah, you'll be right back at it, and I think that's what you hear. That was so interesting. Someone like myself that's obsessed with stand up. You just listen to all these different podcasts, and you see all these people go through this differently, right? You watch a 30-year comic go through this, and they see it as a break, right? Like this is the first time in 30 years they haven't worked 300 days out of the year, right? It's or traveled for work 300 days out of the year, and it's a little bit of a break for them. You see these young up and comers that are desperate, like you say, hopping on any Zoom show they can get onto, right? And then you see guys in the middle that maybe they just started to get some success, things were just breaking for them, and then this kind of slowed it down, and you see them wanting to do the Zoom shows, but I hear a lot of them talk about how it's just, it's not the same. It's that methadone. It's not the real hit that they're looking for. And just, it's interesting to me to watch how different people deal with that, because I liken it to, watching, I don't know if you listen to Spit and Chicklets at all, a hockey podcast, and something that comes up a lot on it is NHL players when they retire, right? And that's their entire being. And that's a hard process for them to find something else and to kind of find out who they are away from the game. And it almost seemed like the same thing where stand-up has been such a big piece of who these people are for so long, and then it just gets taken away from them. It's funny to watch how different people react to it and how they kind of, like you say, they're resourceful and they figure out different ways. But even within that, there's different people that handled it much differently. I bet you saw that with it, even just your own local comedy scene, right? Like how different people reacted.
yeah, that's exactly correct. You're right. And everyone is in a different situation, and we all do stand up for different reasons. So for me, I do stand up because it's the thing that I love the most, and it gives me the most joy to do. And so doing a Skype show doesn't fill that doesn't hit the mark of the reason why I even do it. And so I haven't done a single Skype show, and I've had, especially in the beginning, there was a bunch offered, and I was like, let me think about it. And I just could not think of a way that I would be able to pull it off, that I would have fun, and the people paying me would get a full experience. So that's not to say that there's anything wrong with doing the Skype shows, but for me, I'm like, I haven't done any, because I'm like, it doesn't check the box of what I want to feel, the excitement and the fun of doing stand-up.
Right.
And I also have this nightmare of like, dude, I don't know how people even pull it off with, if you do a live show and the microphone has feedback or anything, that'll screw up your whole set. Like one technical issue like that in a live setting screws up your set. I'm like, I can't even imagine anytime you do a Skype meeting, it's like there's glitching and all this type of stuff. And I'm like trying to do comedy in that.
Yeah.
And people, some of my friends have told me they do shows where the people they don't even have their microphones on. So you do it.
Can't even hear the laughter.
To that, I'm like, that's my nightmare.
Yeah.
So And I did one backyard show because I was like, hey man, at one point during this thing, we were like, we might never have a solution. I'm like, I may just have to learn to adjust.
Yeah.
And let's try it out. Let's see. And to be honest, the backyard show was actually fun.
Yeah.
And it actually was enjoyable, but it wasn't the same thing. And even that I walked away and I'm like, this isn't the hit. You know, it's like if you've been doing your favorite drug your whole life and you've been doing your favorite drug every single weekend. And then for a whole year, you have to like find little bits of it in the carpet and roll it up and mix it with like and snort it. And you're like, kind of, but not really. So I'm like, whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And some people, you know, they'll smoke those stems just to feel that. But some guys just say, if it's not the real thing, I'm not going to do it. And it's interesting, right? Like, that's what I was going to bring up. Actually, the first comedian I had on, Lars Cali, he's Edmonton comedian. I don't know if you know him, but he was doing hundreds of backyard shows and really scratched that itch. But then also when you talk about the Zoom comedy shows of figuring it out at the start, they were very janky. And like you say, all those audio issues and technical issues. But then he was kind of showing me a couple of the setups that they have in Edmonton. I don't know who put it together, but it's got a full background. It's got these big screens so that you can see a bunch of different people and they deal with all that for you. And then certain comedians would just go in and kind of film their shows there. And I was thinking like, man, that's just such a cool idea. It's obviously not perfect. It's obviously not even close to the same, but just to take off some of those things off the back of your mind of like worrying about the technical issues, you solving that, of having that all dealt with for the comics and just have them walk in and do the best they can with those resources. I think that's just awesome to see. And it's cool how, I think it takes a special industry like comedy where, you know, I think there's some things where you can shut it down for a year, right? Comedy is one of those things where people are going to get it some way or another. It's not shutting down. You know, people need to laugh and comics need to make people laugh. That is what they do. And to see the lengths that they'll go to figure it out has just been so cool to me as a fan, just to watch all these different ways. It's just, it seems like every week you're seeing something different. If it's a drive-in show or it's, you know, this type of Zoom comedy, right? Like it was just even seeing the evolution of adding in, like you say, the laughter so that the comic can get a little bit of feedback. Even that wasn't at the start, right? You say you're doing it to silence, like, it'd be terrible.
Yeah. But you're right. It's interesting how the art form, if you want to call it that. Yeah. It always sounds so pompous when you refer to it as art form, but it is interesting how it's been able to morph. And you're right. People were able to figure out ways to still, if you told people in 2019 that live shows are going to be done for basically a whole year, everyone would have been, you know, shitting bricks.
Yeah.
And people have, and Lars is a guy who figured out a way to like, he was the guy. He figured out how to like, yeah, okay, then I'll do it in the backyards. I'll do it in atriums of hotels, all that type of stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how much of that stuff, like I was joking with my one comic buddy about like, even after all this is done, I wonder if we could just, you know, if someone is going to give us some show out in the boonies, if we can be like, look, just pay me 3/4 of it and we'll just do it over Skype and save us the 12-hour drive, right? Like, I wonder, my goal is to make a 3D hologram of myself that can go and do 10 sets a night in different cities. Now, we're not at the technology yet, but it's in the works. And then I just sit back and hologram me goes and works.
There you go.
That's my dream. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, that's perfect. And it's funny because you're so right. I think like we're pushing the limits of what Zoom stand-up can be because that's what we're forced to do. But then once we get out of this and you get back to that, there's going to be certain times where that maybe fills a gap, right? Maybe you can't get to Alaska for a show, but they can put on a Zoom show where you go to a studio like Lars was doing. I don't know where he's doing it, but you know, you have places like that that set it up so that it's not perfect, but it's so much better than just any of those other things that might be that stopgap between getting there. And another thing I just kind of wanted to ask you, I see that when you talk about it feels pompous to call it an art form, right? And I feel like as a fan and somebody that listens to so much and gets to hear all these different comics talk about their struggle and just, you know, if there's one thing that is a commonality between comics that, you know, or do it for any period of time, it's they've been through some shit. They've seen some shit, right? Like it is such a difficult art form. You take so many kicks, so many, you know, so many things get thrown at you. You just have to roll with the punches because like you said, you love it so much. And it's something that I've seen over probably the last 5-10 years, what stand-up as an art form has changed and the almost like the status it's grown, right? There was always that hack joke that everybody said, you know, like in show business, it's blah, 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 comics mime, right? Like that was always the hack joke about stand-up comedy and the respect it got. But it seems like to me in the last couple of years, stand-up is like the heights that just the industry itself has taken is completely different, right? Like there's a certain cachet to being a comic now because I think podcasting and a lot of things all come together. The internet is just, you know, really helped funny people show that to people that, you know, maybe aren't comfortable going into a dark stand-up comedy club with all the rejects of society, right? Like there's all these different ways. I mean, maybe my question would be, do you feel that as well? And have you seen that change as you've been doing it, kind of how people perceive what stand-up is?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, there's been, I guess you would call it a resurgence, or just a surgence.
Yeah.
Depending on how old you are.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, because I wasn't around for the dead times, but there's been a surge with a lot of it's driven by a couple things. One is podcasting, and two is, and I guess this is all part of the same thing. So one is podcasting, which now people are getting exposure to all these new comedians that they didn't even know existed.
Right.
And then they go watch their stand-up and they're like, oh, wow, look at that. So it feeds this loop. And there's one of the things that you mentioned earlier, which I'll just go back to too, is that even during this time when things are shut down, the comics are finding ways to do these interesting shows. But what I didn't think about until you just said it was people are out also asking for that, because people are going like, yeah, I'll pay you to do a Skype show because I know it's going to be shitty. I know it's not going to be the same, but I need something. And I guess I didn't really think so. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't realize that side of it too. And just to say, when we did open the club here for a brief period of time in June, those first couple of weeks were insane because people had this pent up energy of like, I just need to see, nothing compares to the live performance, right? People like, I need to come, I need to feel like a human, and I need to laugh in a live environment again, right? So yes, there has been an absolute surge in comedy kind of coming back. It feels like back into the mainstream in a big way with podcasting. And the other thing too, is that we live in the best time in history for being able to reach people directly. And we a little bit, we don't take it for granted, but we don't, because we live in this. If you went to a comic in the 80s and you said, hey, we have a technology, you could reach every single person that you want to, put up your own content without the gatekeepers, without having to have, this person say yes, this person say yes, and then a giant network say yes. You can go directly to them. They would be like, what the, let's go. Right. Yeah. So that's a huge part of it. And you'll see that with comics like Andrew Schultz, who's a guy who goes, I'm just going to go, I'm going to go directly to the people. And look how that worked out. So that feeds it more, because then more people watch stand-up. And that's stand-up that if he didn't have these tools to go directly to people, he's already talked about it. The industry was not opening the door for him at all. So we wouldn't have ever got to experience that. So it's a mix of all these things, but that's why it's super exciting. And being able to go direct benefits stand-up so much, because so many of the comics are also funny people. And there's nothing more entertaining than just hearing funny people. So it's all a mix of, I just think we're very grateful. I'm grateful, and we're very lucky to live in this time.
And I think also is, obviously comics are funny, but they're also talented. I think like I'm sure every comic knows so many people that are so funny, but they don't have that grind. They don't have what it takes to bring themselves to that level that gets them there. Right. And I think that is what is so amazing about stand-up to me, is just how, if you are, if you stand up on that stage and get those laughs, there's not much, there's certain tricks you can be hacked. There's certain things you can do, but for the most part, it's pretty sink or swim. You're either going to make them laugh or you're not. And I think that allows the talent, they have a certain talent level, and it's undiluted coming to the audience. Right. And now in all these other areas, if you look at TV, if you look at movies, there's some talented people in those, but it's so diluted through producers and all this stuff. And then it gets to the person and it's like, oh, this isn't really good. So now people get this stand up, and then I think, I say podcast, but the way I look at it, I think it was, I almost think of comedy started podcast, not podcast started comedy. Right. I feel like it was just a perfect forum for these amazingly talented people and the amazingly funny people to be undiluted and bring it to people. Right. And I think they were already doing that. That's what stand-up comedy was. But stand-up comedy, I never realized this because I always loved it so much. Ever since I was a kid, I always loved, when my parents would go to sleep, because I wasn't allowed to. I heard you talk about not being allowed to watch The Simpsons on your podcast. I was right there with you, right? Like not till 15 years old was I allowed to watch. Crazy. I know. You look back on now, and I just started watching the first season of The Simpsons, and the amount of like life lessons and like actual really good TV it was. I was like, oh man, why was my mom keeping me away from this? I needed this. This is exactly what, little 9-year-old Nick needed to keep my head on a swivel. But now where was I going with that? I lost my train of thought. It was a great point. Was about to knock it right out of the park, I'm sure. But
now it's gone forever, dude.
Hey,
you know what?
Forever. It'll probably come back to me in a little bit. That's what I love about the long form. You can kind of lose a train of thought. It'll come back around in an hour, so you'll pick it back up again. I remember where I was going with that. So it's this undiluted talent that comes right to you. But I think what I didn't realize was that stand-up comedy for a long time was a very niche thing. Like I love stand-up comedy. I thought everybody loved stand-up comedy. If you ask a room of 100 people, how many people have ever been to a stand-up show? Maybe half of them raise their hand. Maybe ask how many people have been to 5 stand-up shows. Not very many people will raise their hand. And I think that would be very different today than 10 years ago, right? I think that has come in. But I think it was such a, you had to leave your house, you had to go to these comics, and there was only maybe, 10, 15 really big comics that people would be household names that people would hear about. So this undiluted comedy and talent was there, but not a lot of people were experiencing it. Now podcast came in, it was just a medium that allowed that same thing they're already doing just to flow freely. And there was so little barriers to entry that now this amazing experience, this amazing talent that was being brought forth in these comedy clubs across the world is now right into your ears, right? It's in your car, it's wherever you go. And now people go, oh, this is really amazing. And you listen to these podcasts, and you listen to a podcast by just any old Joe Schmo, you're kind of running a 50-50 guess on, is it going to be good? It's really up to that person's talent. Whereas if you listen to a established stand-up comedian's podcast, I feel like you know what you're going to get because they have a certain talent. Because if they didn't, stand-up is so hard, it would have chewed them up and spit them out, and they would have quit years ago. It just by being in that position, it shows that they have a certain gumption, a certain talent level, so you can come right into it. And I just feel like the matchmaking of what podcasting is, that medium, with the talent and charisma and all the things that goes into and grind and drive that goes into being a stand-up comic, just was a match made in heaven. I think that's what, I think some people could probably make a pretty big argument for what came first, chicken and the egg, podcasting and this resurgence of comedy like we talk about. But I don't think you can separate the two. I think it was just one of those things that was like a bomb. As soon as you mix those two ingredients, it was just off to the races. And now we're just seeing more effects, and it's spreading, and more people are hearing about it kind of as podcasting becomes more of a mainstream medium. I feel like it's just blowing it up, and it's not slowing down anytime soon. If I had to put my money on it, if you could buy a Bitcoin of comedy, a comedy coin, I'd be buying all that shit up right now, because I think it's going to the moon. It's a good industry to be in. Yeah,
you're exactly right. And it's the perfect just mix that it all happened, right? That they happen to benefit each other. And then it's a cycle that continues, because people listen to more podcasts, you find someone new, you become a fan, then you listen to more comedy, then you're more involved with comedy, and then you listen. So I think that's a huge piece. And it's nice because it takes away, and this is what you alluded to, was before, when there wasn't a direct way to reach people, you had to go through one of the designated channels. There's only so many spots. So if you go way, way back to, like the 80s and that type of stuff, it's like, or whatever, you would get HBO special. Yeah. There's a couple of guys a year that would get one, and that's it. And everyone else has no way to reach people. Yeah. And there was comics who were, and you still see, there's comics who are way more talented than anyone who's ever been on TV. And because they never were chosen or selected or whatever, then nobody gets exposure to them. And that's a super unfortunate thing. And now we live in a time where you don't have to to be chosen. You just choose yourself. And I think that's super empowering. And that's where, that's what's causing this. And we have so much more now. You think about the volume of podcasts that people can listen to, and Netflix specials, and albums that people, just videos on YouTube. It's like, there's so much more to digest now, and there's so much more to chew on that you can, if you have a tooth for comedy and you're excited about it, it's like there's an endless supply, which is great. And that's the thing, even myself being so obsessed with comedy and all these, but I'm still finding new comics and new podcasts every week, right? And it's so exciting. It's never ending. And what I really like what you said there about, with internet and these options to bring direct to consumer, what that opened up, because it used to be,
you need the talent, you need the funny, but you need all the drive, you need all these things, and you still could make it. You could maybe just not have the right look. You could have maybe pissed off the wrong guy a couple of years ago that's in the wrong spot that really holds you back. There's so many things that have to match up for you to be successful. Now, it takes so many of those blocks or so many of those levers that you need to pull out of the equation and just throws them all onto your drive, right? Like you're going to be funny, but if you as a stand-up want to put in that effort and want to really, build up your YouTube channel, make clips, right? Like I see your Instagram, you're doing an amazing job with that, right? Like I think that really changes the industry because now it puts so much control back in that comic's hands of if this is your dream and you want to run with it and you're willing to do every certain thing, you follow that Schultz method to a T, right? Of what he lays out of this is how you, if the industry is closing doors in front of you, this is how you kick those fuckers right in, right? Like if you follow that, it's in your hands, you can do it. And that gets me excited because I think that is exactly, and again, this is just like a glove in hand thing because I think that's exactly what comics are, right? And I think like you talk about, that journey is so much a kick you in the face, knock you down thing that, bombing is one of the most, I've never done it, so I can't say this, but from what I've heard, bombing is one of the most horrifying experiences you can go through. And if you're not willing to put in that work, you're going to just, fall off and you're not going to get there. Now, if you put that carrot in front of them, if you really try hard, there's nothing holding you back. The only thing inhibiting you where 10 years ago, it might've been the industry that could inhibit you. Now it's all on you, which I think is scary as well. And probably it might even keep some people out of the trying it as well, because that's also an excuse, right? Now you put all that effort in and you can just blame it on the industry. That excuse kind of every year it goes away a little bit. And I think that probably scares a lot of people too. And there's probably a lot of people that are established that have been, making that excuse for quite a few years now. And now that, you see these guys come up and blow past you using this new framework and your excuses are kind of dwindling, right?
Yeah. I mean, the good news is your career is completely in your hands and your responsibility. Yeah. And the bad news is your career is completely in your hands and your responsibility because in the way that it's actually very empowering and exciting to think, like you said, if I just work hard and I am smart about, especially podcasting, social media, you can build up a fan base, which is the most important thing to do as a stand-up comedian. Yeah. And on the flip side, you're right. Then there's some people who probably go like, oh crap, I have to do all that. Well, isn't my manager supposed to? And you're like, no, that's, and I think that's part of that archaic, like entertainment story, right? Yeah. That's that old, and I don't know where it comes from. And I'm sure it was true at a point in time. I think probably even the 90s where it's just like, you become a star overnight, right? Yeah. And that's just not really
get your sitcom and you're off to the races.
Yeah, that type of stuff. And it was like, so that's kind of, and that's where you have to realize that doesn't really exist anymore. And it's good because it's better to be able to at least, even if it takes longer, if you get there, how you did it. If you just get made a star because you got plopped onto a sitcom and then you blow up, but you don't even know how to get there. If it gets taken away, you're completely helpless. So that's the trend that I love to see is that the responsibility is going back to the actual artist. And it's not just with stand-up comedy, it's with music, it's with everything. The industry is flipping from the control now being with the artist because they're the ones with the fan base. They're the ones who are building it up.
For sure.
As opposed to, before it was like, and there's still some of it depending on what you want to do, right? Like I think acting is still like, who knows, dude? I've never even... My buddies that are actors tell me about that industry, and it's just like it's insane. Like you have no power or control. Yeah, but I love the responsibility and the idea that's like you can just make it happen. And then once you've proven yourself, and again, I'll allude to Andrew Schultz, who's a great example. The industry shut him out, and then he made himself valuable. And then guess who comes knocking at his door? And that's the whole. What could be a more beautiful story than that? And anyone can really do that. If you focus and you do it the right way. And so that's the coolness of the time that we're in right now.
And what's even cooler than that is for fans like me that was following Andrew for quite a few years, watching him get those kicks and watching this stuff and him saying the whole time, like, just trust the process. This is how you do it. Right. And he was saying this stuff like, you know what? And then when he first did that first, I think it was Views from the Cis where he put those up, and to watch the response and to watch him grow and to say like, hey, I told you guys. And then to watch Netflix, when he announced that Netflix show that just came out, like, I got goosebumps. It was like I won. It was like I got a Netflix deal, right? Like, because I had followed that long. And I feel like that is what's so cool about podcasting as well that comes along is now you get to follow these guys' journey. And I'm so invested in that. Like every time they have a new step, like when they open that Miami office and they're rocking it down there, like that gets me excited because now, you know, I'm part of that. I've watched them grow. I've watched them say, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this, and watch them blow that out of the water. Right. Like, it's just so cool to be able to experience that. It's such a new level. And, I really enjoyed what you said about, you know, all these other industries as well and how they match up with this, because I think I learned this lesson, about what the industry can be, with music actually first, because I always kind of thought, you know, if you're good, music is music, you know, if you hear a good song, you're in, right? Like, how can they hold you back? It's pretty, common sense who can sing, who can't, right? Music is one of those things, kind of like comedy, where it's hit or miss. It hits you in the soul or it doesn't. And then I went to Nashville and I went down Broadway and I got to see all these bars, 3 tiers each one has a live band playing, and they're the most amazing talented artists that I've ever seen, just blowing it out of the water. And you've never heard of any of them because they probably just don't have that one little thing. And just how hard it is to be, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that. Right. And I feel like that is what creates that is, you know, these guys are grinding, putting in all these hours, but just this industry requires so many things to fall into place for you to be successful. And now it's changing, right? You see these guys come up and just put their stuff up on Spotify and YouTube and create this. And you talk about TV being the last bastion holding on. And I think the reason for that, I think it's changing too. I think just the capital that it requires to do stand-up and music is so much less than what it is to film TV show. I think it's just on a slower trajectory. But I do see, actually in one of your podcasts you were talking about, and I'm happy this came up because you're talking about, you were more making jokes about it. It was fucking hilarious, talking about TV shows that need to come back, like Pimp My Rides and stuff. And it was hilarious to listen to. I really enjoyed it. But also, I think that's what's going to happen. And I think comics are going to be at the front of this because I think you already see it with Bert Kreischer. You know, cooking shows were great, right? You like your cooking shows, but I've never fucking seen a cooking show like his cooking show where he just brings comics on and they talk bullshit and cook shit and burn it and swear. Yeah. And it is the best. Like if you put that on a TV channel, it'd be the biggest thing on TV, right? Because it's that same topic where we talked about, it's the undiluted talent just being able to shine through. But I think that's where comics are going to say, oh, there's cooking shows. Well, we can do that better. Oh, there's this, we can do that better. You know, because now you can get cameras to film shit for half decent pricing, right? You can find a couple guys with a vision and you can bring all these TV shows back and do them your way without all those dilution levels of producers and all this shit. And I think we're going to see a renaissance in TV, but it's going to be on YouTube, right? Like people just go out, put it out and then monetize it yourself, right? Like that was always the biggest thing, I think, scaring people away from that Schultz method of throwing stuff on YouTube, because how do you monetize it? But now we're seeing so many creative ways of monetizing, right? The biggest one I think I can point to is Joe Rogan, right? Like he monetizes his podcast way differently than everybody else does, right? Like and also that's because of his size, but I think so many people are learning the lesson of you don't need to monetize things the same way everybody else does. You don't need to be scared because if you're creative, you can find different ways to monetize. I think podcast is a huge example of that, right? You can get your MeUndies sponsorship and your Harry's razors or whatever everybody else has. Or you can, you know, go up to your local guys in Calgary and find somebody that really connects with you and you can make just as much money doing that because they have real effect and it's going to really bring people through their door. It's all about what can you do? How can you use your creative talents to monetize it, right? Like I think depending on just what the industry says is so silly when we've already seen that there's people that have talent that can completely overrun the talent that's within the industry, right? And I just think that is what's exciting about me. We've seen what's happened so far. What's next? I think it's going to be revolution after revolution on all these things, because I think we're just gone are the days where you can, you know, just make an easy paycheck because you're the third producer on a TV show and you put your little spice on it and probably make it worse than it was before. I think the days of that are gone. And I think or not gone, but slowly dwindling. Yeah.
And I think people are becoming a lot more aware of bullshit, right? Like we are our BS meter. Like, do you remember back in like the mid 2000s when we would watch Gene Simmons' Family Jewels?
Oh yeah.
And we thought that was real shit going on. Like that's how dumb, and it wasn't our, but we were so unaware of how overly produced shit is that we're like, holy shit, another crazy adventure in Gene's house? Fucking crazy.
I was right there with you.
Bro, if you try to watch even a clip from that nowadays, you're like, oh my God. You basically see the guys with the boot. It's like the Truman Show when he realizes the whole thing's been set up. Like nowadays, if you watch these old shows, you're like, you can almost see the cameraman, the writers in there. You're like, oh my, how did I ever fall for this shit? Dude, there's a clip that's so funny. And I've actually talked about this on my podcast, but it reminds me because Chris Angel had that whole magic show.
Mind
and
Freak.
At the time, dude, Mind Freak. And our BS meter was so low and out of tune with this production that I remember being at school being like, Chris Angel levitated across a river. And we'd be like, yeah, I guess he really did it. And then there's a clip, and people should look this up after. It's so funny. It's like he does some jump from a dune buggy off the Grand Canyon, and he lands inside of a spoiler alert, he lands inside of a helicopter. Dude, and it was on TV.
Yeah.
And if you watch it now, you're like, I cannot believe people used to fall for this.
Yeah.
But the bigger point is it's moving. You're right. Things are moving from this overproduced weirdness to more organic stuff. And by doing so, people realize what is and what isn't. And people, you know what? This is what I think. People at the end of the day just want funny. That's all that they want. And they just want real, organic. Yeah. That's what people really want. And you've seen it in the things that are the most popular. You know, Joe Rogan's podcast is bigger than any TV news outlet. And those outlets have producers, writers, all this type of stuff. Yeah. And it's because it's just real. It's just organic. And that's one of the things that I see even too in the stand-up comedy industry, where it seems like the industry picks for these certain things have moved away from not just what's the funniest. It's like, you got to check all these boxes for the look you got to have and all this type of stuff. And what you realize is that's cool, but people watching stand-up comedy don't give a shit. They want
even a little
what's the funniest. Like people at home watching comedy are not like, oh, it better be some young, cool, hip person that has this belief and this belief, which is what the industry thinks. They present these certain types of people because they go, that's what's in right now. And you know what's really in is just the best stand-up.
Yeah,
that's what
exactly.
people give a shit about.
Yeah.
They don't care. Right. So, and that's where there's still a little bit of, I sense a disconnect, but whatever, right?
But that's, and I see the same thing. And I think oftentimes things are changing for the better, but I think just as humans, we're impatient. We want things to be changed now. But where I see stuff like that is All Things Comedy, where they've probably put out 5 or 6 comedy specials of, like you say, the funniest people that just have been stonewalled by the industry. Right. And just like, there's a New York comic and she's just one of the funniest people I've ever seen. And I'd never seen any of her stand-up, but All Things Comedy comes out and they see that, they give her a special, and it's one of the best specials I've seen in the last 5 years. And that gives me so much hope that there's people that are seeing exactly what we're talking about and trying to get out ahead of it. And, they're obviously making a little bit of money on it too, but who cares? All Things Comedy is made up of comedians. It's all going back. It's staying in the family, right? And that gives me so much hope that it won't take as long, because I think that is the competition you need, right? Like if All Things Comedy produces 10 specials and whoever, Comedy Central produces 10 specials, right? Comedy Central does, we have this color, this person, this creed, right? All these things that they think people are after. And then All Things Comedy just goes, you know what? Hey, we might have 8 white guys on there, but they're the funniest 8 white guys. And we got to, whatever it turned out to be. They just went for the top 10 funniest comics that have the best hour to put out right now. And then you just stack them up side by side with competition. We're already seeing what's happening, right? And I feel like that gives me so much hope for the speed that this is going to change at, because I think if there wasn't something like All Things Comedy pushing back and showing that competition, right? YouTube is obviously that for those guys, but I think industry seems to be so blinded by that they won't even open their eyes to what YouTube is. And they so clearly with their actions have shown they don't realize where things are changing, and they still think, the TV models, all that. But, I just, there's so many things to be upset about with the industry, but there's so many things to be hopeful about around the industry, things that are taking away those powers and putting it back into the comics' hands. I get so excited about where it's going to be, right? Like if I think in 5 years what it's going to look like, I have no idea, but I'm excited to be a comedy fan. Fuck.
Yeah. And it's the best time ever to be a comedy fan, because you can find your favorite comics, and you can find there's more and more content every day. So, and it's me, I'm a huge comedy fan too. I mean, I do stand up, of course, but I'm also a huge fan, and I have my, podcast that I listen to every week. And I'm like, man, I forgot that my car even has a radio dial. Yeah. It actually scared me the other day, because I got in and the music, and I'm like, where the fuck is this music coming from? Yeah. And I looked and I was like, oh shit, FM, AM. Like my brain, who the hell listens to the radio? I'm like, there is not one thing that at this point you couldn't find to listen to on podcast. Anything that you're interested is out there, and I guarantee there's a good podcast talking about it. And I'm like, who would sit here and listen to some top 40 song and then 3 like Mazda dealership ads when there's this plethora of amazing material out there? So it's so funny, but I'm just like, I don't know who, like that type of stuff. Even, dude, I realized even with TV now, like when I watch, because we also live in an on-demand society now, I realized I was like, I think it was Judge Judy. It's one of the only daytime shows I still, because that show is still lit. Shout out to Judge Judy. Mad plug. If there's one thing I want to plug on this podcast, I'm not kidding right now. Yeah. It is Judge Judy's show is so underrated because she doesn't put up with shit.
JJ is the goat. Love it.
Dude, JJ and everyone listening knows Judge Judy is. And right now, most of them probably going, oh, I haven't watched this one in years. You haven't watched it in years? You go back right now and you watch it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because it's amazing. But I remember the first commercial hit and I'm like, what am I doing? Dude, I can't sit through. Dude, I can barely even sit and just watch Net. Like our attention span now is so hijacked. I'm like, when I'm watching Netflix, I'm like, well, I gotta have my laptop here because if there's a lull in this storyline, I just want to Google image a random thing, and then I'll look at it again. And then I gotta have my phone here too because what if someone texts me? So it's like that's our attention span now is so crazy that that stuff. I'm like, dude, who's commercials?
It's crazy.
What?
It's and I think I'm maybe a little bit too crazy with it because forever I've been like this. I think growing up, my dad hated commercials all the time, and he got a PVR really early, and he was always, as soon as a commercial come on, FF was, if you heard FF being yelled in our houses, fast forward, right? You could not have a commercial on. But now I'm an absolute psychopath. If, I'm listening to Spotify and I think I'm turning that all the way down, turning my phone upside down so I can't even see the ad. I will freak out. I have to be a couple minutes behind the hockey game so I can fast forward. Like I will do everything in my power not to see a commercial, and not to see it, but not to let it even enter my eyeballs. I'm just an absolute psychopath. I was listening to your special last night on Spotify and it came on 4 fucking ads in a row.
Dude, why do you have, hold on. You got advertisements on Spotify?
I know. I know, but this is the thing.
Upset.
This is the thing.
Upset.
I want to upgrade, but I hate it so much of the app and the difficulties and how hard it is to listen to podcasts and all this that I can't bring myself to give them my money because I hate them. But anyways, so what I do, I switched over. I went to your YouTube channel, watched it there. Boom. Yeah. Perfect. Right. So there's different things, but I don't think they realize how much people hate ads. I don't think that has entered into their ratio, or not even hates ads, because I love ads in certain ways, right? Like, Ari Shaffir and his podcast, the way he does ads, I love his fucking ads. I laugh my ass off at his ads, right? There's certain people that know how to do it. And you know how many products I've bought from comedians that know how to do ads? A lot. You know how many things I bought because I saw a fucking ad on TV between the hockey game? Not a lot, right? First of all, because I'm forcing myself not to watch it. But also, if you do, I don't know if you've experienced this, but how fucking bad are commercials now? Like, hockey is usually the only time I see commercials, just because sometimes it's live sports, and every commercial is about COVID. Every commercial is depressing. Every commercial is doing the same thing. It's just like, how I don't realize how far they could disconnect to not understand what they're putting out, what they think they're putting out versus how it's received. It just seems like it's so far apart. It almost doesn't even make sense. Like the cognitive dissonance at work.
Well, the boomers still like the commercials, dude. The boomers watch that, and they're like Swiffer wet jet. Oh, damn, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, don't worry about how much dirt she just had on her floor. Look how much she cleaned it. What I think is funny is like the car commercials. I don't know why they still make those. It's like okay, this one, it's going to drive through the mountains and do some turns. And not one person's like, I think we did that with the last 10. Like every car commercial is the same. So I don't know.
And when I have a business degree, so we went into these types of commercials and marketing and how they do it. And there is a lot, there's, decades and decades of research behind it, and, all the colors, all the songs and music they use, it's all subliminal. Right. And I recognized at a young age. That's why I read that somewhere that was what they were doing. And they showed studies of all these people, even people like me, that say, ads don't work on me. And they would show the subliminal ones with, double blind testing, how it actually is getting and it is affecting you. And that pissed me off to such a degree that now if I see an ad for my biggest one, Raid Shadow Legends, it's a fucking game on your phone. I hate that fucking game with so much passion. Never played it, don't know what it is, but it was advertised on YouTube for so long that now when I see ads, if I can't get around them, if it's an ad that I can't skip, I look at the company and I make a bet with myself, like I am going to try everything within my power to never buy this product because they've hindered me, right? Like, which again is me being an absolute psycho with ads.
Something
right?
wrong with you, dude. There's something wrong with you.
I think if you said something wrong with me, that would be a pretty big understatement. There's a lot of things wrong with me. I'm well aware. That's what we're working through this on this podcast, letting everyone in on it. Yeah.
This is just a therapy session for you at this point, I guess.
100% is a therapy session. I mean,
do commercials hurt your family? There's some deep-seated, like you got some commercial.
Can you show me on the doll where the commercials touched you?
Something, yeah, dude. Like something you should dig into after this podcast. Watch Judge Judy. Once you're done with that, dig into your past because there was something happened to you during a commercial break. And
I think you're onto something.
I accidentally brought it up, but something deep-seated. I don't know if something fell on you, but you got some commercials anger that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, I definitely, I'll call up my therapist after this and dig deep. But on the topic of Judge Judy, if you ever need a pick me up, just Google how much Judge Judy makes on that show. Cause that will make you feel
she crushes it. Dude.
Oh yeah. She makes bank doing that, which when I first read that, I was so pumped. Cause like you fucking love that show. That was one of the only shows we'd watch back in the day, right? Always on, daytime, doesn't take shit, just she's who she is through and through, right? Like I think they tried to, and this is another piece that I love about, podcasts and just, I guess not just podcasts, but some way where you can show authentically who you are to people that it resonates, right? Like one of the biggest examples of this is how many times they've tried to cancel Joey Diaz, right? It's not going to happen. He has been so unashamedly honest about who he is and what he's done that it's impossible to cancel him, right? But I think the same things with Judge Judy, right? They try and go after her for being mean to people. It's like, have you watched the fucking show for 20 years? Like, that's who she is. She's not putting on an act. She's not walking in there to, put her TV face on. No, that's who she is. She's doing her job. And for that reason, you insulate yourself with honesty about, people can't come and try and lie about who you are when you've documented exactly who you are. And that's what gets me so excited about podcasting too, is in this age where it seems like so many things you're walking a tightrope and things can be taken away from you and things can be twisted. I think the more evidence you have of who you are, if you are a good person, I think if you're a piece of shit, this doesn't really work for you. But if you're not a piece of shit, like I don't think I'm a piece of shit. I think I'm a pretty good guy. I might fuck up every now and again. I might have some fucked up things in this old noggin, but if I can show on the whole, over 50 episodes, couple hours long each of who I am, people are probably going to have a second guess, right? And then the people that don't do that, who the fuck cares anyways? They haven't even listened to you. They're those people that go on Twitter and just look for somebody that's getting kicked so they can join in and throw a couple stomps themselves, right? And they don't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's a good point. Like, you seem to get in trouble when you present yourself one way that's inauthentic and then you get busted differently. But yeah, from the onset, you're like, Joey Diaz and you just say this, I say crazy shit, but that's who I am.
Yeah.
Then you're right. It's same with like your Mom's House podcast, one of my favorite podcasts. I mean, love it. They have everything that they say on that podcast is cancelable, whatever, right? 100%, but it's because they've always been like that. And they say that's who we are. It doesn't, for whatever reason. It's the people who, it's when you're trying to be squeaky clean and then it turns out you're not, or if you genuinely cross the line, like the Papa John's guy, like these psychos that genuinely do something insane.
Exactly.
But
and I think that's the best example I think you can make is Your Mom's House, because for a show that's been going for quite a while now, like pretty established, pretty huge, they've never even had a rumor of cancellation. I've never even seen anything floated. And I think they're such a perfect example because they're so unapologetically who they are. And I feel like the fans that go on that show and watch that show, you couldn't put that, if that show isn't for you, you can't watch 10 minutes of it. You're going to turn that shit off, right? You can't even force yourself in there to find the cancelable stuff because you're going to be turning it off. And I feel like the people that do watch it love it so much and are so diehard, right? Like myself, I feel like Your Mom's House was one of probably the first 5 or 6 podcasts I ever found. And it was one of those ones. And actually it was a very influential podcast because that was the first podcast I started watching because they do so many clips that I started watching on YouTube. And then some of the other ones I listened to, I would also throw on YouTube. And now I watch half my podcasts on YouTube and I actually, throw it on and, while you're cooking, you can laugh and you can see. I think it also helps too, if you have a podcast with similar voices as maybe one of the podcasts I was listening to recently that maybe stopped little while ago with two young Calgary gentlemen that have very similar voices. I probably listened to 4 or 5 episodes. I still couldn't tell who was who, but I just assumed both of you were you, and just say like, oh man, Todd's really on today. He's just saying all the jokes, both sides of it. It almost seemed, but I really like the video component because then you can watch a couple episodes and see the people talk. And once, for some reason with me, once I see it, I can easily pick the voices out just on audio without it. But until then, I was just struggling. Right. So I feel like that's also something that, adds in. I feel like lots of people don't do. I think there's a lot of arguments to be made not to do video on a podcast too, and it opens up some other lanes, and it's all just what is right for you. But I just I love all the different forms, and I think that's what's really eaten into that TV stuff. And something I wanted to bring up too, talking about reality TV, and like you said, how you go back and try and watch some of the stuff, and it's so like, how do we even believe it, right? And I think it started with things like Survivor, that the first reality television. I don't know if it was Survivor, it was one of those things, right? And they were at the start very real. They even talked about it was too real at the start, right? Like the first couple seasons of Survivor, they had to back it off because it was too crazy. They were putting people into, unsafe positions, and they kind of have it. And it, over the years, reality TV got worse and worse. But I think the ideas they had were really strong, right? And I feel like I see this. One of the best examples I had was there's a Netflix show that came out a couple years ago, maybe more recent than that, called The Floor is Lava or something. And I was thinking, what a cool show, right? They just big production value. It's almost like a big jungle gym and people have to run across. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then you listen to it and it is the worst show of all time. Not because of actually what you're doing. That's pretty entertaining. But if you mute the commentary, because it's just the most not funny, like they're trying to be funny and it's so bad. But I feel like if you took that idea, did it on YouTube, if you found the money to build all these platforms and shit, that's the only thing holding you back. It's the production value. And just let, comedians talk about these idiots going across. It would be the best show on television. I would watch that show all day. And I feel like that's going to be the switch. I think there's going to be some company, it's going to be a production company that's going to realize that and throw some real money to do these, reality TV shows. I point this also at, what's the best game show, most, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, right? Pretty generic game show. Can you imagine that game show with no holds barred? You could swear, you can talk about it, right? You let Joey Diaz fucking run that show. Like, it would be bonkers. I feel like there's so much good meat in these ideas of what these reality TV shows are. It's just so terribly executed and so overproduced that I think there's just a wealth of ideas out there for people with real talent to come in and do it right and do it justice. And I feel like that's going to be the next wave of, one production company is going to start doing it and just be hands off. Here's the money, figure it out. And it's going to show success. And then more people are going to do it. And then it's going to create that competition like we talked about with all things comedy and Comedy Central. I think it's going to create that for all these TV shows as well. And then we're going to have a whole new renaissance of what TV can become, and reality TV specifically.
Yeah, I think you're right. And once someone proves that it works, listen, dude, it's just a business, right? So once someone proves that it works, and then the one program, one station puts it up, and they're making money, they're killing it, then everyone just moves in on it. Everything is just copycat, right? So
100%.
It's funny because the Survivor, that's another one that reminds me of that is Storage Wars. I'm pretty sure that Storage Wars started off more authentic.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was genuinely in the beginning a novel concept of just these people going to the lockers, bidding on shit, whatever, right? And I'm sure they edited just the most interesting parts, but that seemed to be, there was at least, it seemed like a kernel of truth to it. And now, I mean, and I actually like that show. It's structured so well to keep you watching it. Yeah. And then I tried to watch, like, there's all these offshoots now. There's like Storage Wars, Houston, like all these places. Yeah. And it was like, they moved in and then they overproduced it. And it's like, dude, it was weird to see that they copycatted like the original Storage Wars cast. It's like, hey, you got the old guy, then you got the dude with the wife that's way too hot, and it doesn't make sense why this relationship even works. So he must be making a lot of this shit. And then you have the father-son combo or whatever, and you're like, that's great. And then you can literally see on the new location, it's like, oh, there's their version of the old guy. There's their version of the father-son combo. So, and that was one where, and then I heard they started like putting shit into the, and you're like, why wouldn't they? Obviously that's, but it
stacks the deck a little.
Yeah. And then you watch that and you're like, dude, I can't even watch this shit. This is ridiculous right now.
It gets so bad. And I think you stumbled upon a really important piece there, because I think that's exactly the problem. Like you say, it's just a business. They're just going with what makes money. But these businesses are everybody's so scared of trying anything or making any mistakes because there's so many people that, oh, let's not try and make a new show. Let's not try our own spin on it. Let's copy exactly what they had. Okay, we need an old guy. We need this. We need this. I just don't want to make any decisions because now if it fails, it's not my fault, right? Which is the complete opposite of what we're seeing with like stand-up and podcasting, stand-ups getting into, cooking shows and this kind of thing. Is they don't care if it's like anything before it. It lives or dies on them and their vision. And you see them, they reap all the success or reap all the opposite, right? All the criticism if it flops, right? And I think that creative space there is so much different than this. Let's not mess up. Let's not make any mistakes. And I feel like that is exactly what is just keeps perpetuating the same stuff, because you think, well, how have they not realized like TV's gotten steadily worse and these same people are in these jobs? It's because nobody wants to admit, nobody wants to rock the boat. Nobody wants to shake anything. That's always what happens when you get so many cooks in the kitchen right now. Nobody wants to lose their job. Whereas you talk about, news stations versus Joe Rogan and the numbers they pull. Joe Rogan's got 3 people. That's his whole operation. There's 1,000 people putting this TV show out. That's a lot of people, a lot of jobs, a lot of people that have people. And it's not even their fault too, because what I found when I started getting into business and I had employees depending on me, that was way different than being an employee somewhere. That feeling of having people where now my decisions that I make don't just affect me. They affect people that need to put food on their table. That was such a switch that I never really saw. And I think that's also a big part of it too, is it's not just them being cowardly for themselves, is they have people under them that they don't want to make a mistake for and they don't want to be beholden to. But we just need to bring a little bit more risk into, make a mistake. Fuck, it's not the end of the world. Like you can say you messed up, try it out. Like the rewards are so much higher. And I almost don't even want to say that, because that's what opens the door to guys like you to go kick in these doors, is them, circling the toilet bowl with these old ideas is what opens the door for you guys, right? If they got their act together, it'd make your life harder. So I'm not, I'm kind of torn, because I want them to keep doing that and, keep putting this terrible TV on these channels. I'll go to YouTube and I'll watch fucking guys like you make me laugh my ass off for 5 minutes, right? Like it's just so, it's so silly. So silly.
That's what I would say. It's like whether or not the TV and that type of stuff comes around is actually irrelevant. It doesn't matter, because there's an outlet to have authentic stuff out there. And so in a weird way, it almost pushes more people to I don't even know what you would call it, like the organic. I would almost call it like the organic sector, like conversational podcasts and that type of thing is just organic. And that's like we said, that's what people want. And organic doesn't even necessarily mean shocking, but it means you should be able to watch people and listen to people talk in the way that people actually talk. Sometimes you say fuck. Sometimes you talk to your friends, you make things that are insensitive comments about anything, ethnicity, gender, all this type of thing. And it's not because you're a bad person. It's because that's how people communicate and that's how people chat. And because of this like overly sensitive theme that's filtered through our culture, it's found its way into the mainstream stuff.
Right.
And it becomes so distant from people's regular experience in life, where it's like, oh, you can't even say this or that. And most people are going like, well, you can, because it's the intent behind it. And me and my friends, most people talk with their friends in ways that you would get if it was put out like on the news, you would get destroyed. And it's not because all of us are bad people. It's because of the oversensitivity with people. Everyone's walking on eggshells. And then so the content that fits that doesn't resonate with people, because you're like, that's not my life. And then when you see the other end of the spectrum and you got some guy, you got like Joey Diaz talking crazy shit. It's a little bit refreshing, I think, for people to go like, fuck, fine. Somebody can actually just say things that they actually feel like, just talk normally or freely, I guess is what it is. Because it doesn't have to be as crazy as, Joey Diaz even. It's just like to feel like someone can actually just talk freely is what I think people crave that. Because man, some of this stuff and you see it now, and it's just like, it's working its way into like TV shows and movies, and it's like the sensitivity and all the things. And you're just like, oh my God, like, what are we even doing? And it's become so much, those themes have become so much more important than even just, I don't even know, for
solid content. Like it's more important than everything
content,
to them.
You're right. It's almost like that's the way to put it. Like the content in some areas has become secondary to the identity of,
for sure.
This is, look at how good we are. Look at our values. Look at how like people patting themselves on the back for that. And you're just like, they don't realize most people look at that and go, okay, like we see right through what you're doing and whatever.
And that's exactly that cognitive dissonance, that it almost blows you away that they can't see that. Like that it's so, to guys like me and you, that is so obvious, but there's clearly people in these higher positions that don't see that. And I feel like this is another area where I think social media is a big player in this, because so many people, I think there's a big disconnect. Like it seems like there's almost two types of people that understand this. People that understand like us, and then people understand it from the other side. And you can, if you sit down and try and put yourself in their shoes, you can kind of see their logic of they're trying to do good things. They're trying to protect people. They're trying to protect people from getting feeling certain. You can kind of see that. But I could never really find that one differentiating thing that really breaks those two camps up. It's not right and left. It's not all these things that you say. Those categories don't really fit what you're seeing, right? Like there's kind of wackadoos on both sides, right? That doesn't really make sense to me. But I actually was listening to another podcast. It's one of my favorite ones. It's not a comedy one, but I actually found them through Joe Rogan, Brett Weinstein and his wife Heather, and they're evolutionary biologists, and not very funny. Well, actually, if you got the right type of humor, it's pretty funny. But he was talking about it, and he posited that it's the actual division is people that think that the internet is real life, and people that have been in real life and know what real life is.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is that big division. And I feel like so many people, like these, Comedy Central thinks that Twitter is real life, and that's what people want, right? That's why they're coming up with this list of just match all the categories. It's huge. And actually, like I probably heard that podcast 2 weeks ago, and ever since I heard that, walking through this new framework of seeing things that way, it lines up so well. It's just these people, there's people on the right and people on the left that just think that Facebook and Twitter is real life, and it's not. And there's people that understand that. And like when people say, you can't say that, that's not how people talk on the internet. Yeah, because you can't say that stuff, right? Like but then there's people that go in the real world and say, yeah, you can say that. My buddies say it all the time. I listen to podcasts, people talk like this. It is real. And I feel like it's almost, that disconnect has almost hurt funny in a way. And I'm trying to find the right way to describe this. Like I find myself a funny guy, not in the same way as, comedians. That is the peak funny, right? Like I'm not going to compare myself to that. I know what goes into that, but I always, was never a fighting kind of kid. I, never been in a fight in my life. I always played hockey, and I was always, the thing, but I always used my humor and my wit to defend myself, right? Like I never wanted to get in a fight. I was always cowardly. And that brought into my head of just always go for the joke all the time, right? Drives my girlfriend nuts. When she asks me a question, she knows that if I can think of something that's funnier than my real answer, I'm going to say it, right? And I do this all the time. And I do that when nobody's around, even if it's physical comedy, right? Like one time on campus, I was walking to class and I had cowboy boots on. I'm slipped and slide. I probably did 20 feet of like almost falling, but not quite falling. And at the end, I threw up the hands like in gymnastics and the head up, like the full stick to landing. I didn't know anybody was around me, but then 3 people behind start laughing because I do that shit all the time, even when I'm in my house by my own. But what I learned from this is, in doing that, sometimes the funniest answer, when you're always going for the funniest answer, even though, right, like my peaks of funny is not near what real funny is, what you guys do, but you find funny sometimes is inappropriate. Sometimes the funniest answer is the most inappropriate thing you can say. And to be able to have that understanding is so, people need to understand that about comedy. And I feel like that holds comedy in that place of where it needs to be for people to actually go out and take those swings and to understand. I feel like this thinking that the internet's real and that all these things are put in place, it takes away that understanding of what funny is to people. And I feel like that is almost, and I think it's changing, and people are coming back, and people like Joey Diaz and Flagrant 2 and them just showing that, no, fuck this. Funny is funny. It doesn't matter what people say about it. If it makes you laugh, it makes you laugh. And I just feel like it's one of those things where, I wonder what more we can do to make people's understanding of what funny can be, because it feels like people have this weird perception of what funny has to be. It can't be offensive. It has to fall into these parameters. Funny doesn't have parameters. You can't, that is the essence of funny. It's unparametered. You can't put any sort of things on it. It's just, it makes you laugh or it doesn't. It's guttural, right? When you get up on that stage and you make a joke, it doesn't matter all these labels and stuff they put around it. It's funny or it's not, right? And I feel like that is the big one.
Yeah, I don't even think that, I don't think that most people have a misunderstanding with what's funny. I think there's a subset that's very loud, and they direct that, and that's what makes that's what causes the fear and all the corporations, that type of thing. But for most people, most people just like what's funny is funny, and most people joke around with their friends. Yeah. Most people nobody talks in a PC way to their friends. That's a regular person. I'll say most people don't talk in a PC way, but on the flip side, most people don't say real hateful things to their friends. So that's the agreement that we all have with each other, which is you can make a joke to me. You're my buddy. You can make a joke that's insensitive, but I know it's coming from a not really hateful place. And I'm able to pick up the subtlety of that. And that's how, and trust me, 95% of people get that. And like you said, the internet is not real. Like it doesn't really reflect people's real opinions. And so most people literally, back in the day when I would do comedy shows, you have 300 people in a room. That's a good sample size for if a joke is going to be taken the wrong way or not, right? If it's going to hit on any sensitivities. And I can count, knock on wood, very few times that someone has actually been offended in thousands of people that I've performed for over the years. And, even with subjects that would be considered super, super taboo. I'll give you one was, I used to have a joke about, I can't remember if it was gender reveal or something. It had to do something with transgendered people. It wasn't making fun of them, but that was the theme somewhere. I can't remember what the joke was. And I remember, and I was always nervous because I thought, especially during that time, that was sort of the hot topic. And I said, I hope that people understand when I'm doing this joke, that it's coming from a place of we're all in this together. We're joking around. And just because this happens to be one of the subjects in it, it doesn't mean that I'm making fun of that. It's part of including everyone in the, and I remember a lady came up after the show one time and she said, my husband just came out as transgender like a couple months ago. And she said, your joke made me laugh the hardest. Yeah. Because she could actually relate to it. So that's where I'm saying, when you're so afraid with this and the fear that's caused by the internet with even these topics, is that really when you tell things from a way that is not, people can sense, is this coming from a hateful place or is this coming from a joking around place? And in a live comedy show or live setting, people are smart. We're social creatures. We pick up on that. And you can really say almost anything as long as it's really coming from a good spot. Everyone senses that and they pick up on it and they and they laugh. And that's real. When you have 300 people that are laughing and they're there, it's not tweets. This is a real experience. That's real life. And that's the part that, and so that's the part that I don't get that worried about it. And I'm encouraged because I don't think that the sensitivity change that we've seen it's a small subset that seems to drive the narrative. Now, there is a downside to that though, because you don't realize how much our bubble of what publicly can even be like in the mainstream could be considered funny until you even go back. For instance, I watched Superbad. Superbad is my favorite.
Just watched it this weekend.
Dude, it's my number one movie of all time.
So fucking funny.
I literally, that's hilarious you say that because I watched it on Saturday.
Yeah, watched it on Sunday.
It's so every movie that I watch now, from from my childhood that I loved, my brain can't help but think when you see certain things, you go like, couldn't say that nowadays. Yeah. There's whole scenes that are like, you couldn't do that. You could. And in a way, I looked at Superbad and I'm so glad that got made when it did, so that they could do those jokes because the jokes really are harmless, but in the context of this increasing sensitivity, that if they made that movie nowadays, it wouldn't be the same thing. And so that's where I have hope for most people. That's where stand-up and podcasting will thrive because trust me, most people get it and they're smart enough to understand. But yeah, man, when you see it, like it's even when you watch Friends, which is so funny. I binge watched Friends for like last year, I think when lockdown first started, dude. And that was could there have been a more mainstream sitcom than Friends? No, the most mainstream. And there are themes in that show that you wouldn't be able to do nowadays. One of the ongoing jokes in that show was that Monica was fat in high school, right? So they'll flash back to scenes and she has the big fat suit. Yeah. And dude, when I saw that, I paused it and just started laughing at about like, if you put that on TV nowadays, it would just be outrage everywhere. And by the way, when I say outrage everywhere, I mean, that's what the news and everything would say. Yeah. And it would be 0.2% of people who actually give a shit and no one else would even care. But because the rest of us don't care, we're just like, whatever, dude. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know.
And that's maybe the clarification I should have made before I made the other point about people's understanding of what funny is. I don't think that is a big problem in general. I think it's when you look at those two groups of people that think the internet is real and the people that understand real life, it's that small, tiny subset of those people that are on Twitter that don't have that understanding. That's why when they get off their phone and walk into a comedy club, that's that one person that's offended. But you talk about having that never happened to you. It's because there's not that many of them out there, right? I love Bill Burr on this. He always says this. He's been saying this for years. This isn't real. When all this controversy happens about him every couple months because he's just, he's a funny guy that says funny shit and it's going to happen. He goes, what? Like when people ask him what the controversy, he goes, what controversy? There's nobody's come up to me. Haven't talked to anybody. This isn't real. It's a couple people on social media that are really loud. And I think that's that big difference, right? Like, and I think that's awesome to hear because that is something I've felt for a long time, but to hear a guy like yourself that if there was this, huge mob of people that are just so easily offendable and on this crusade, they'd be at these comedy shows. You'd be getting yelled at every day, but that doesn't happen in real life because that what people are portraying this issue as is so not real. But because social media allows them to be so loud about it, now these companies, like it's almost like these crazy people think that their internet is real, and people that are at these high points in companies because they treat the Twitter like it's a real thing, right? They make executive decisions about their content and about what they're going to produce off of what people are saying on Twitter. And that's that big disconnect where you can't have that. You need to have people that are in real life that understand how things really work in the real world, making those decisions, or financially you're going to crumble. And that's what you see, YouTube and these guys that are going their own way and understanding that concept and leaning into the real funny are doing amazing. And these people that don't have that understanding and are listening to Twitter and what people want, and making these movies that, are just pandering to this stuff, and then they flop and nobody watches them. They're going, what? Like Twitter said this is what they wanted, and now nobody's watching a movie. And it's fun to sit back and watch. And say about Superbad, just have to cover it. That scene when Jonah Hill or whoever his stunt double is gets hit by that car. I think for my money, and I said this before the scene came out, that is the best physical comedy car hit I've ever seen. Like the way his legs spread, like that is just unmatched. And it's funny we talk about this because so much of what we talked about earlier about TV shows getting into the hands of comics, that was one thing when I watched it on Sunday, I felt like this feels like really funny people made a comedy that has the hint of what podcasts are. This is how people really talk. When I was, 17, 18, graduating high school, that's how I taught, right? This is how me and my friends taught. And they didn't put any filters and just let it out. I feel like, and then I was thinking the same exact thing. It's so funny. Like, oh, I'm really sad because, like they couldn't do this anymore. But I feel like that is one of those things where we're just in this weird period where, I think it's going to shift back. And I think there's going to be people that get in there and, you could I think Superbad could be made today and just put out on YouTube. You just need to have the right people get the right amount of money in their pockets, right? If you I could probably make you a list of 100 different comedians that are trying to break into the industry and doing little TV roles here and TV roles there, like Andrew Santino and all these guys that are in LA have that acting bug and want to do both and want to make funny content that isn't stand-up, right? There's stand-ups like Andrew Schultz where he wants to do stand-up. He wants to be the best stand-up and that is everything, right? But then there's a guy like Santino that is an amazing stand-up comic, really wants to be a good stand-up, but also wants to do TV and wants to bring his comedic vision through that medium. And it's just about giving them the reins, giving them that money. And I feel like we're going to see in 5-10 years, as soon as those production companies start to see that there's going to be money to made, the first person takes that risk is the first against the wall and gives some real cash to some real funny people. What that is going to produce and the amount of money it's going to make is going to knock people's dicks in the dirt. And I feel like that's what I think another one of those was Bridesmaids. I feel like that was kind of already on the other side of it where things were, I hadn't seen a funny movie in forever. And then you see, Tina Fey and some real funny female comedians get a little bit more reins and a little bit more free play. And I don't know, maybe I don't want to say that, it might sound bad, but maybe it was because they were women. They gave them a little bit more rope to play with some of the things. And it's amazingly fun. Right. And I feel like that is, there hasn't been enough clear-cut successes for them to prove that point. Or I think another issue is, even though that might be it, like I'm sure there was a lot more in the back end of Superbad. I'm sure there was a lot of people taking pats on the back and response, on the production side, that they put this all together without realizing that they just stayed the fuck out of the way. Right. And I think that's a big issue is that, there has been these successes that prove this point, but then people don't diagnose it the right way and see what actually made it successful. They, try and say all these other reasons. Oh, we promoted it well, or all this other stuff. Right. Like I think people are choosing to to close their eyes to what success is, because it doesn't match up with what's Twitter's saying. It seems, I don't know, but I just can't see that lasting long. I think it's just going to take one company to take a risk and throw it out there, and it's going to be a smashing success. I'm going to see more and more and more. And yeah, I'm so excited for what TV is going to look like in 10 years. I think it's going to be amazing. And I don't think it's going to be on TV. I think it's going to be on YouTube or something else. I just don't see it. Those companies loosening their hold. I think they're going to get passed by like Blockbuster and just be completely, passed on the highway. But I'm excited to see it. I can't wait.
Well, I think what we're both saying is we need to bring back Gene Simmons' Family Jewels. I mean, I think 100%. If there's one theme to this podcast in general, I want to plug Judge Judy and bring back Gene Simmons, dude. He's selling his house. I just saw it on TMZ.
I need me some Family
He's going to have a whole new house. Yeah. Yeah. You know what's going to be interesting too is I don't know in the future, because our attention spans are getting so much shorter with everything, and technology, everything's just moving into our hand with technology, right? So I wonder what TV... there honestly might be a time where we don't even really sit down and watch TV. Think about how much shift we just watch shit on our phones, right? I mean, really, if there's a really lit AF, as the kids say, if there's a lit AF fam, new Netflix series, then everyone when fucking Tiger King comes out or some shit, then you'll sit down and binge that shit. But it's interesting because everything's just moving towards our phones, and that this fucking dude. I try to watch TikTok and I'm like, that's what makes me feel old as shit, right? Oh my god, you have that. You finally, I guess there's a moment in everyone's life where you realize you're not the cool young generation anymore. And when I saw some girl just outside my office because I can see the street. Like I was working one day, I look out and she set up a tripod and I go, oh, she's shooting it for like a realtor or something. Yeah. And she put her camera and it was facing the sidewalk. And I go, this is it. And then I swear to God, she did like this
busted a couple moves.
And I'm like, bro, I was like, I don't know if I need to call the police. Like, I don't know if she's having like a seizure. And I'm like, man, what the fuck? But you look at that and you go, what's it gonna turn into, bro? Like, right. I mean, stand-up comedy. We might even just get down to like headliner is like a 3-minute set. Just that's all the kids can pay attention to, right? It's just like somebody hosts for 30 seconds to 30-second middle, headliner 3 minutes, and everyone's like, good, I got other shit to do, bro.
Yeah, no shit. I can't
sit down.
Yeah, I got a YouTube queue 10 deep here waiting to get watched. But then at the same time, you see Joe Rogan do 3-hour episodes and it's the most popular show on TV. So, I feel like it's almost the attention spans are being almost pulled in all different directions because there's so many different mediums, right? Like you look at TikTok and 100% same here. That was that one that really kicked me in the dick and was like, you are old. Like you don't get this. And it happened to me. I was running. Oh, that was something else I want to get in is asking you about your running. Cause I'm a pretty big runner myself, but I was halfway through a trail. I see these 3 young girls, like sitting by a dump, like one of the garbage cans in the middle of the trees. I'm like, what are they doing? And then I come back running and they had it all set up and they're all doing their dance. I'm like, oh my God, this shit is just absolutely ridiculous. So these kids are nowhere near a house. They had to walk like 25 minutes down this trail just to find the right spot for this TikTok. It's like, like this is absolutely crazy. But my first question that I opened the podcast with, I was going to ask you, and then I said, no, I'll ask you something first, was how did you get into comedy? I feel like if one question I got to ask is that I just need to hear that story. Maybe I'll try and
that's hilarious. It took us this long to circle back to this. Yeah. Dude, I just started doing it. It's such a funny question because it's a question that makes sense. It's like, how did you get into it? I'm like, I don't know, dude. I just did it. So I always knew I wanted to do stand-up comedy. I started right when I was 18 because I knew since grade 5, grade 6. I just knew. I knew. Yeah. And I remember there was a kid when I was in junior high who was already doing it. There was like a guy named Mike Todd was already doing comedy. Right. And they're like, he was in like grade 8 and he was going into clubs and doing, I was like, that's cool as shit. But I'm like, I'm way too afraid to do that. Yeah, fuck. I was like, I can't do that. So, but as soon as I turned 18, I'm like, let's do it, man. So you go, I started doing open mic nights. Yeah. And it's just one of those things. It just keeps going. I did open mic, loved it. Yeah. I keep going. And then you start doing it more and more. And then I started, I got my first paid gig and they were going to get $50. And I was like, you're going to give me $50? Yeah. I can do comedy. Yeah. I was like, are you in? I'm like, I would do this shit for free. Don't fucking give me money. Yeah. So I remember the first, I did comedy and then they gave me money after. And I'm like, what could be better than this? I'm like, I would pay to do this shit. And they're going to give me money. And then it just becomes addictive. And it's validating as you work your way up from being an open micer, having 5 minutes. And then you keep working, keep trying, bombing, eating shit, coming up with jokes, writing, trying to try shit. Rewrite, dude, fucking everything. You go through everything, but it's exhilarating and it's fun the whole time because the highs are so high when you have a good set. And I also had so much like nerves in the beginning years. If I knew I had to set the next week, I couldn't eat starting the week before. Like if it was next Wednesday was amateur night. The Wednesday before I'm like, I can't eat today. And because I'd be so fucking nervous. And then when you do it, there'd be the relief of, oh, now my nerves are gone and it feels good. So it's just super addictive. And when you work your way up and you start getting paid more money, and then I started headlining. And
when was your first headlining set?
I have the poster on my wall. It was,
I bet.
Oh, there's no date on it. The first headlining set, it's kind of funny because I'm getting do you want me to just pause and put my thing
up
down?
To you, brother. I don't give a fuck if it's bugging you, give her, but doesn't matter to me.
Looks so fucking greasy. Anyway, the my first headlining set, I remember it was for like this small fringe festival in town. And they just saw me perform at some open mic somewhere. Like I probably like middled it or something. And I probably had 15 minutes of material. Total 15 minutes. I remember I showed up to the show and I was so excited. I'm like, I'm going to headline. This is crazy. Like I'm going to close the show for the first time. And I remember the girl was like, yeah, so just, I don't know, like don't go over 45. And I'm like, don't go over 45. And I was 45. Like, holy fuck, dude. I was like, I got to triple my material right now. This is insane. And I remember I just ate shit because I was like, I didn't have any of this was probably like a year and a half in. And I'm like, dude, I didn't have any of the tricks with even like really doing good crowd work with like or anything, surfing through. And so that was a good lesson. I mean, I'm still glad I did it because sometimes you got to just be like F it and take it. For sure. But that was a good lesson. And then I went back to middling. Slowly, you do like 15, 20 minutes, that type of thing. And then I probably really started headlining, I think in 2017. Okay. Like corporate gigs. And then eventually I got into the clubs and that type of thing. And that's when it becomes super fun because when you have 45 minutes to really explore and like fuck around and do crowd work, that's where I have the most fun. And I don't feel confined to have to get my jokes out. And there's initially that pressure. I remember the first time there was that pressure of like, I had sudden realization where I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, I'm the end of the show. So I can't fuck it up. I didn't realize it's not like you're just doing more time. It's like, you have to put a bow on this show and you need to also be the best part of it. You can't go up and like, if everyone else is amazing and then you go up and it's like kind of the show dips, I'm like, that's not my job. So I was like, oh my God, the pressure of like, you have to be the highlight of the show. You have to close it up nicely. Like there's all these additional shit that you have to learn. But then when you do it, you're like, oh, fucking amazing. So I don't know. That's a long-winded story to say open mics, middle, headliner, grind, perform all the time, all that shit.
And I mean, I probably should have clarified my question because really what I was just asking was how long you've been doing it. That was the real question I was going to ask because the second follow-up I wanted to ask was, and so about 11 years you've been doing comedy now?
Yeah, crazy. Wow. And it's crazy to think about that because it literally it just flies by. Like I can't believe it's been 11 years. But yes, because I started right when I was 18. Right. And and that was kind of my thing because just a little peek behind the curtain for yourself and for everyone listening, like everyone around me knows I really love stand-up. And my sister, not a huge stand-up person, said like, hey, for the podcast, I saw this guy in Vancouver last year. His name's Todd Ness, and he was really funny, right? And I said, oh yeah, for sure. I'll look him up. Maybe I'll ask him on the podcast one time. But I was really worried. I hold stand-up on such a high pedestal because I'm so in awe of what you guys do that I was very nervous to reach out to any comedians at the start, right? And then when I saw you perform and you're a pretty young guy, I was like, holy fuck, he's funny. Like, how long has he been doing this? And then I hear you're 29. I'm like, man, like
That's what I was thinking. I was very curious to see when you started, because the more I listened to comedy adjacent content, right, whether it's actual stand-up or podcast, whatever, I always hear this about, a 10-year comic and how important that 10 years is. And you're not even really a comic until you've been doing it 10 years. And, I always thought like, that can't be that accurate. And obviously there's the Chappelles that, started at 18 and are amazing. And there's the guys that take a little bit longer probably. But I didn't realize how powerful that is. And regardless of how funny you are, it just takes time to learn your voice in that. And that's what I heard when I heard your stand-up. It was so clearly who you are. And especially once I started listening to your podcast, because then I could see that your stand-up was so in touch with who you are. And I feel like, I'm curious how long that started to happen. Was that only in the last couple of years, like when you got close to that 10-year mark, that you started to see that? And was your bits more, how do I even ask that? Did you see that your voice started to come out more organically when you reached that 10-year mark? Or was that something that you kind of saw earlier on in your comedy career?
Well, you always start off as not yourself, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
The one thing that's a guarantee is however you start doing stand-up, it will not be you. We all start doing an impression almost
of your favorite comic. Yeah.
It's unnatural.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone, I think most of us have this syndrome where, yes, you go up and you're basically you're a comic that you've seen, and it's because you don't know how to do it. And that's the one you've been listening to. It's the one that got you excited. And I know for me, it was Dane Cook was at his height when I started.
Yeah.
And so I remember I had sets, and I remember one where afterwards the comic was like, "You sound just like Dane Cook," right? Mm-hmm. Which sucked to hear, but it's definitely true.
Yeah.
And you can't take it personally. If there's any comic starting, it's like, just recognize it happens to everyone. And I can even see it now. Like when there's new comics that go up, I'm like, oh, this guy listens to Anthony Jeselnik. This guy listens to Norm Macdonald, because I'm like, they are doing the cadence and of that comic. Yeah,
but that's what stand-up is to them.
Exactly. And that's actually fine in the beginning, because it's your way of getting into the, slowly getting into the pool, finding your way through. And then, so you're right. And then there's this transition where you start to slowly become just yourself. The ironic part to me that was stand-up has always been to be as funny on stage as I was off stage, which sounds so simple, but it's actually the hardest thing to do, because you want to just being yourself. Yeah, it's the hardest point to get. So it's almost one of those full circle things where it's like you have to go through all this extra shit just to come back to who you actually are.
Yeah.
But that's when it starts feeling good, and the audience can sense it, and you're not forcing anything. So for me, there's not a specific moment where I could say that's the set where I found my voice, but I could definitely sense throughout as my material shifted, and there was jokes where I felt like, oh, this is something that a wacky thought that I had, and it's different and it's unique, and it's not just a premise anyone could come up with. Yeah. That's starting to feel more like me. And there are moments on stage where you're like, fuck, I just literally like riffed like I would with my friends in a hockey, the dressing room.
Yeah.
And that's me coming out. And then, it starts, and it's one of those things that slowly happens over time, and you can't really force it. I guess the fastest way to do it is just more stage time, because the more stage time, the more reps you get in, and you shed all of the extra, like trying to be something, I think, unless you're pursuing a character. But if you're just trying to get back to who you are, it's just slowly over time, your material evolves. And I know for me, one of the things that I've noticed is that I'm not a clean comic. I swear. Yeah. But I've noticed over the last few years that my material has become cleaner in its content. And not because I even made a conscious effort. I've never sat down and go, oh, I want to be a clean comic or a corporate clean. Yeah. But I've noticed that the things in day to day, the things that I think of and that are funny are genuinely not cleaner subjects, but like the whole like dick sucking jokes and all that type of shit. It's not who I am really. Like I wouldn't do a dick sucking joke to someone, kind of. I don't know. It's just something I've noticed with my material where I'm like, when I look back at my older stuff versus now, I'm like, oh, it's a lot. I feel like my newer stuff is a lot more well thought out and a lot cleaner, because that's the actual things that I think are funny versus just like doing a pussy joke or whatever, which is definitely stuff I did in the early days. And part of that is because it works. You can here's a trick to any comic who's starting out. If you have a joke and you don't know the end, literally just say suck a dick. Yeah. Any joke. If you don't know the end of a joke, you can literally just say, and then someone sucked a dick, and it will work every time. So part of it in the beginning is like, you just say that shit because it works. And then, but if that's not how you actually talk, eventually it kind of falls away. And that's what happened with me. It just kind of fell away. I'll still throw down fucks and that type of stuff. But like, even like, like, I don't know if I would really say pussy. I like how I'm just going through them now. Shit pit, like
which ones you got?
I'm just going through them now, but that type of stuff, because I wouldn't really say it. So that's just one thing I've noticed. Now maybe that's more of my authentic voice. Right. Maybe that's just because I'm becoming a boomer. I don't know what's happening.
Who knows? I think if you try and dissect that too
don't think about it too much.
You'll put yourself in a mind pretzel if you try that. But something that kind of the follow up to that question, I have questions on questions. I see, the more I listen to, like I said, podcast Jason, the more I see this natural progression of what becoming a comic looks like, right? It seems like everybody talks about that. Exactly. You have that, you're almost learning to skate and you got that chair, right? And that's the whatever comic the cadence that you take, right? Some of those dirtier jokes that work. There's little crutches that you have, and those are what supports you and gets you through the start. And then you start to find your voice, and that starts to happen around the 10-year mark. Once you find your voice at that, now you perfect that voice and you get funnier and funnier, and you roll through material, and you are learning the craft again through your voice and how you do it. And you're learning your own things of how you do it. And it seems like it's definitely not cut and dry. It's going to be different for everyone. Everyone's going to work at a little bit different pace, but it seems like on average, you can kind of separate it out into different stages. And it seems like to me, it would be a lot less painful for comics if we tried to help people understand that, right? Like if there was some sort of set, like, hey, this guy is a 5-year comic. And then you had some sort of essence, which I do now. I think, like I had just gone and seen Burr, Rogan. I was just on a kick. I think I saw Schultz. I saw all these comedians I really wanted to see. And then Brandon Schaub was coming to town. Another one of my favorites. Really like him on the podcast. And I listened to his stand-up, and it was funny. I really laughed, and it was good. But you could really tell that he had only been doing it 3 years at that time. It wasn't that it was bad. It was just certain things, and you'd heard it talked about. And I felt like it would be so much different if people could see like, hey, this is a 10-year comic, and this is what a 10-year comic is, right? That's when they're finding their voice. You're starting to get, this is what you're going to get out of them, and starting to change the expectations. And I feel like it'd be a very easy change, not easy change, because I don't know how you'd ever explain that to people. I feel like you have to be a pretty big comedy nerd to even understand what we'd be talking about with that. But I feel like it would take so much of the pressure off of, for a layman comedy fan, they sit in that chair and somebody comes up on stage. They don't know the difference between a middler and a headliner to the degree that it would necessitate them to understand what kind of jokes they're about to hear. But it would take so much of that pressure off. And I wonder if, you get to 20 years in the game and you look back on it and you think, well, fuck these guys coming up. They don't need to have it any easier, right? We don't need to change expectations. I went through it with nobody understanding that, but I don't know. I feel like I haven't fully articulated out my point there. But there's something to it about just the different areas of what comics can do and what skill sets they possess, and to help bring that forward into more of the general understanding. I feel like it would just help comedians move forward and not have so much pressure to be, like as good as a headliner when they're 3 or 4 years in.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, because I think that one, people don't really give a shit. I mean, if you went to if you went to a comedy show and you're like, hey, the next comic is going to be pretty shit, guys, but he's still in, like, listen, he has this 2-year badge on. He's still like finding his voice. People are going to like, well, I fucking hired a babysitter. I don't give a shit. Yeah. Like, am I here to watch a comedy show? Or dude, imagine if you went to a concert and they're like, okay, listen, the guitarist does not know how to play their songs, but he's going to try. It's going to be painful, but listen, he's just learning. People are like, I don't care. I think it's like, you go up there, and part of what drives you is to go like, oh, I want to be as good as I can. I don't want people to notice if I'm new or not. And if that headliner destroys, I want to be as good as that headliner. That's what drives you. So if you put training wheels on people, or you put on the ticket, it's like, hey guys, just so you're aware, this is only a 10-year. It's just like, people don't, like I said, people only care about what's funny. And the other thing is, you might be, even at 2 years, you might be blowing the roof off the cloud, and then you're good. Who gives a shit about your 2-year handicap?
You're right. You're right.
No, I ban it. I ban this concept, and I do not support the labeling of I think you sink or swim. And Like, and yeah, the audience is,
yeah, they're going to figure it out. Right.
Yeah.
And I love having an idea like that I feel pretty confident in, and seeing it totally torn apart and just see like, oh yeah, that was a stupid idea. I love that. I feel like I just got so much better. Now I'm not going to be banning about that stupid idea anymore, because you're so right. You picked it apart so perfectly. And I feel like that's something where I feel like you see that in podcasts where somebody pitches an idea, it gets completely, torn apart, and they go, oh yeah, that is, and you don't see that on TV or anywhere else where, you say something, it gets torn apart, and then you change your mind. You don't see it a lot of places. I feel like that's what makes podcasting special. I feel like that's good lessons that are being learned to people, just like, don't be stuck with your opinions. If you say something and someone gives you some good reasons why it's not, because you're so right, that would completely take away so many of the incentives that drives what comedians are there for, right? That you always talk about, not being able to follow somebody. That is a huge part of comedy, right? And people trying to, not, or I guess trying to think of the inverse of following somebody, like trying to set it up, trying to crush so hard that people can't follow you. That is such an in-baked part of it that if you try to put any training wheels on it, the whole thing would fall apart. I think you're so right.
You don't need, it's your feedback with comedy is the audience, and that's all you don't, it's not a martial art. You don't need different belts when you graduate from a thing. Right. It's like you're ranking on the show. And this is one of the things I think too, is like, if you're the headliner, you're expected to be the best. So if you're the headliner and the middle is crushing harder than you, then you need to find a way to go like, that can happen. It's not acceptable. I need to be the best. But I'll go back to something you said, because I think it's really interesting, is the thing that I do agree with is there is a difference between a 3-year and a 10-year comedian that's beyond the material
and beyond how funny the person is. Because
beyond how funny the person is, there's like instincts, and you've been in the audience and you can sense it, right? There's an instinct, and there's something there that you can sense on a very experience. When you see Bill Burr go up and you go like, this fucking guy, you just have this comfort. You're like, he can handle it. He's in his element. He can handle anything. And that, what I love about stand-up is there's no way to fake that. There's no way to get that without getting it. Like the only way that you get that skill set and that those tools and all those things is by going through the years of doing it, by doing all kinds of crazy shows. Every time you do it, you get a new thing in your tool belt. And that's what I love, is like, you can't have that taken away. And when that's why it's almost beneficial. Some people blow up super quickly, and it's almost unfortunate because those years of doing the shitty shows and trudging around and working, being in different environments, and even the years of going on stage when no one knows who you are and having to prove yourself gives you abilities that you can't earn any other way. It's no different than I don't even know what you would equate it to, like a sport, like someone who's been doing it for 15 years. Someone else might be close, but there's going to be things that person knows just by doing it so much. If someone's done 1,000 competitions and someone else has done 4, the person that's done 1,000, let's say it's even bodybuilding or something stupid, even if they look the same, the person who's done 1,000 has picked up all of this knowledge and stuff that they might not even realize just by doing it. And stand-up is one of those where, even as you've mentioned, as an audience member, it's apparent, and you can tell, you can sense, oh, this guy's been doing it forever. He's, he's got those skills or something.
That je ne sais quoi, that whatever it is. And,
the essence.
The essence. Yeah. No, I hear you. And I think now, having that idea flayed in front of me like that, I go back to how I came up with that idea. And it's just me being offended on the behalf of seeing. So what happened was, I went and saw a show in Edmonton with Brendan Schaub, and I had listened to Brendan for a long time on the podcast, had, before he even started stand-up, watched him get into stand-up, and I was so excited for it. And I brought some friends, and it was fun. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to say it wasn't funny. It was funny, but I'd taken them to some other shows. I'd taken them to see, Schultz. I'd taken them to see some other guys, and it just wasn't the same. And I was so frustrated because I wanted to say he's funnier than this. Like, he's just a 3-year comic. Like, and you could tell, it's like, that's why I wanted to say, like, it's not even how funny, it's not anything to say about his his funniness, right? Because when you see him on the podcast, when it's not, he's so funny, right? And you can see that talent is there. He just needs more time to craft it, right? And it was like, oh, I felt bad, and I was thinking of some way I wish you could let people into that. Like, I think as a comedy fan, you can see that spark of what somebody's going to be, even if they're not there yet, because you're just been around it more and you can see that. And it's like, oh, he's going to be better. And I think that's where that idea came from. But that was just me seeing somebody that I'd, listened to for years and years at that point go out and not, I feel like he wasn't given a fair shake to that. And that's where that old idea sparked. No,
I get you.
So, yeah.
I get you. I think that actually it's almost, no, I totally understand your point. I think it's almost instead of having to explain to people that, oh, this person's only 3 years in, it's almost the other side where it's like people, and it's to no fault of their own, how would you ever realize? But when you see someone who's been doing it 15 years, people, it's almost like you have to show you have no idea how much work. And because it's common and because it looks like it's just a guy telling jokes, and there's a funny guy in every office who's probably like, oh, I could go do that. It's like, you don't realize the subtleties and the things that performance requires that you can only build up over thousands of times of doing it. And you're right. When you see someone who is funny and has good jokes, but they haven't just had the time to build those up, you can see the difference. And it's just the clunkiness, and it's the stage presence. And it's not even that person doesn't have the potential, but it's that you haven't logged those hours, and you realize that, if anything, I think it just gives a good opportunity to realize when you see someone with a 15-year experience, you're like, holy fuck, I didn't even realize these little subtle things that comes from all that experience. Right. So,
And I think a huge piece that proves that point is when you see people, when we talk about, Comedy Central, all these guys looking for certain boxes to fill, sometimes they pull them too early, right? Oh, you fit this one dynamic. You're only 7 years in. It's not that you're not really funny, but they take them and they put them in front of all these people when they're not ready for it. And you see it sometimes. And that's what's unfortunate about a lot of this, where now I've heard this probably 6,000 times on podcasts all over, of just, oh, how hard it is to be a white guy in comedy right now. And definitely I see that, and I see that point, but also I think it is a good point too, because you need to do that 10 years, that 15 years to build all that up before you get that opportunity. And sometimes that feels like you're being held back, but I think it's for the best in a lot of times, because if you were that person that just checked a couple, boxes, I don't even want to get in trouble by saying a couple lists of what these things could be, but everyone could put it together in their head. That person, if they're far and few between, the odds of them being a good 15, 20-year comic and not already being known are pretty low. So now they start picking the fruit from, that isn't ripe yet. And I feel like that is so unfortunate for those people more than anything, because they could have been, an amazing comic. Like, I don't want to be mean and pick a few examples. I'm sure both me and you could pull some out and talk about it, but I feel like you're exactly right. It's not the other way around. It's people need to understand what goes into this. And I think that is changing. I think with podcasts of letting it in, right? Like I never knew. I always enjoyed stand-up, but I didn't know what went into being a stand-up and all those years of grind and those crazy shows that people would do. And then once I understood that, now I have such more of a respect for it. But that's just something that's going to come organically. And instead of trying to handicap it the other way, just more people need to, understand it and realize what stand-up is, because I feel like that is just something that if more people in the world realize what that was, I think stand-up's already on a rocket ship. But the more people understand what goes into it and what 15, 20 years of work looks like for this hour you're seeing on stage, I think it's just going to keep going and keep going. And I think that's what's so cool and so glove in hand, like we talked about with podcasting and stand up. It just feeds into each other in all these cool ways, and is just adding into to be one of the coolest things. I love it. I'm so excited to see the next generation, these people that get to listen to these podcasts and learn all these lessons and have been listening to 10 years, maybe they're 10 years old and they really like stand up and they start listening to podcasts and they hear exactly the pitfalls and all the, stupid things you're going to fall into along the way, and go into it when they turn 18. And now they have 8 years of just all this knowledge from all these people. Now they get to go into it. I'm so excited to see what the kind of shit they come up with and the highs that they can reach is just going to be phenomenal. Right. Yeah.
I'm optimistic too. I think it'll be exciting, and hopefully, when things open back up here and we'll have a certain now. Yeah. Hopefully we'll have that surge will continue. And I think it will. I think there's a lot of pent up energy too. And, for sure. And by the way, it's not trendy, right, to be just some white dude in comedy right now. But when I hear that again, I just go like, so what, dude? Like, like we said, this whole thing, it's your career is your responsibility. You live in an incredible time. Do you have a camera? Do you have a microphone?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a editing software? It all comes back onto you anyway. So yeah, I don't like hearing about when people blame external things. It's like, okay, so what's the things out of your control. Sometimes things are going to be in your favor. Sometimes they're not. If you're waiting for the external environment to swing around and be perfect for you, okay, cool. Let me know how it works. Let me know how that works out. Who cares, right? It doesn't matter. So I would say, it's not about whining about everyone just needs to be, regardless of whether it's you're in or not right now, you have the power to build your own fan base. And because most people, 95% of people are looking for just comedy and whatever is the funniest, that door is open to anyone. If you make the best content and you're funny, then there's no one that's going to exclude you. They'll just go, this guy's fucking hilarious. So that's I would say just don't, anytime people are blaming external stuff, I go, no.
So I know I've already kept you here way longer than I said I would, and I just have so many questions. And again, thank you for giving me the time. I could talk about this comedy stuff all night if you let me. But I definitely wanted to ask you about podcasting and getting into that, because you started stand-up so long ago that podcasts weren't really, well, they were a thing, but very, very niche. And as that came in, at what point did you start to notice podcasting and the effect that it had on the industry and what stand-up was? And then when did you start entering into the podcast world, either as a guest or starting your own? Like how was it already kind of forcing the issue and be like, oh man, I got to jump on this podcast stuff. I don't know about it. Or were you early on it? Like, how was that process?
No. And they've been around forever, right?
Yeah.
Like
2009, 2008.
Joe Rogan's goes way back. And of course, actually Bill Burr, nobody gives him credit. He was started his in like 2006.
On his phone. He would like call into an app or something, like record.
So here's what I'll say about this. And this is so interesting. And it actually goes back to Schaub, because he came to Calgary and he sold out Yuck Yucks his first time here. And he sold out like 6 shows or something. Yeah. All I remember was like, they had to add some Wednesday show at like 4 p.m. I'd never seen it before. And that's when I realized that, wow, he is selling this out and he's never been here before. And in fact, at that time, he didn't even have his comedy special up. Yeah. So I'm like, he's out here. No, there's not even stand-up comedy clips of him. So it's not like people are really fans of his stand-up because they haven't even seen it. They don't know, right? Yeah. They're fans of him as a person. And when people are fans of you as a person, they'll support you in whatever you do. And that's where I realized, wow, this is powerful. And that's when I started looking into it and making my own. And I have mine now where I do it literally every day. So I do 20 minutes every day just because I want to be like part of people's routine. I want to be in contact with people, just give them a little nugget to chew on every single day. I think that's really fun. And then I'm always there. I'm always like, and then it feels like you get to know me and that type of thing. But that was when I realized it's so powerful, because I think we've shifted from a world where you used to just do good stand-up and then you would sell out shows based on that. And I almost think it's the reverse now, where you create really good content and you build a fan base, and then stand-up is the thing that you get to come and do for them live. But you actually build your stand-up shows based on your presence, your content, that type of thing. Right. Versus the other way. For sure. That was a big shift in thinking for me. And it's a big shift, I think, for everyone, because that wasn't when I started, that wasn't the case. When I started, it was just like, you do stand-up, you put out a special, and then you sell out your shows based on your special. But it's not, that's the old way, right? So anyway, you owe me a lot of money for how long we went. Yeah, I know. Fuck. Hey, I got the e-transfer set to hit you right after we we didn't even talk about by the way, I will plug my podcast, Ness and Around. Yeah. It's like I said, I do it every single day, 20 minutes every single day. We talk about everything. Give it a listen. My Instagram, I'm tossing up a bunch of new content and stuff on there. But what are you doing for so you're a runner, you're telling me. Now, are you doing trail running? What are you doing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, all winter because it's so damn cold. I was just hitting the old treadmill, but in the summers, yeah, no, I try and do 10K a day, just getting out there, getting out into the wild and a little fresh air. Usually it's my break. I have a pretty stressful job during the day. So in the summer, if I can have an hour and just go for a run and then come back, I'm a completely different person. I just love what it did for me. It's amazing. I fucking love it. Can't get enough.
I fucking, so here's what's so funny is I hadn't run, I've never really run consistently.
Since Dryland?
Literally, like I'd never really, I did the cross country and all that, bullshit where you get like this, participation ribbon, all that shit. Mm-hmm. But I'd never really been into running. I'd done it for like hockey or whatever.
Yeah.
And then when everything shut down last year, the gyms were closed and I was a guy who would work out every day with weights. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, shit, what do I do? And I'm just like looking at my running shoes and I'm like, I guess I'll try this shit. I've never really, and I literally remember I went for my first run, 3 kilometers.
Yeah.
That's all I could even do. I'm not even kidding. And I came back and I was like, oh, this is going to be my thing now. Like, I'm like, this is everything that I like to do. I like to be able to measure if I'm getting better. Mm-hmm. It feels good.
Yeah.
And dude, I've been addicted. Yeah. I've been addicted since then. We're on a run streak right now with my buddies where we're competing. I'm looking at how many days, 130 days in a row.
Oh shit.
Because my brother in the middle of November in our group chat was like, who wants to do a competition to see who can run at least 5K a day and it just kept, it's at the point now we don't even have to check in with each other because we just like, we'll hear if you die, then I'll know you didn't do it.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so, dude, I'm the same as you though. It's just like fucking and this is another thing with COVID where I'm like, this is just a great place to direct energy. And I'm
for sure.
I fucking, every day. It's just, I love it. It feels good when you feel like you can see your pace getting faster. You get to be outside. I'm like, I had this realization. I'm like, dude, I didn't even know if the COVID didn't happen. I'm like, I wouldn't even know I liked this. Yeah, I'm like, I wonder how much other shit there is that I just haven't done.
Mm-hmm.
Or I loved it. And I'm like, I like this. I would have never thought when I was weight training that I would be a runner. And I used to look at those dorks in the winter and I'm like, look at this idiot. And then, dude, I remember I came home with my balaclava and my mitts and everything. And I was like, I'm this fucking guy now.
Yeah. I'm that nerd. Yeah. Well, that was always me. My dad he started running actually when I was at a certain age, but he's built like me. We're built like, German tanks. We're not made to run, but again, same thing. Me and my sister were going on our bikes beside him. He'd start running and then he would run, 8-9K every morning at 6 a.m. around our little hometown. So it was always kind of the running thing. And I just, that's not for me. No, he's the runner. I can't do that. And I was just blamed. I don't like getting up in the morning and I don't have any other time to run. But when I graduated university and I came up here and just moved to GP. So I didn't really have many people around. So just something to do, the gym gets old. So you just go for a run and explore town. And man, same thing, just little bits at a time. Cause when you start, I was running like, I don't know. I do like a minute walking, a minute running, minute walking, minute running, 2 minutes running, 1 minute walking, just building it up. And then eventually you get it to where you can actually run, 5 kilometers without stopping, 10 kilometers. Right. And then you start getting dumb and you try and without training, just try and run a half marathon just to see if you can do it. And you freaking can't walk for 2 days. Right. Just shit like that. But you test it out and you see what you can and can't do. It allows you to push your limits a little bit. I think some people just need to push some limits and you can push limits in a lot of different ways. And I think everybody that has that in them is always pushing some sort of limits in all these different areas in life. And then COVID happened and it shut so many of them down.
Yeah,
and now you can't push limits in all these ways where running is one that's always there. It's you don't require much of, some running shoes. And if you're really tough, you don't even need that. And now it's just you against yourself and you can push those limits and there's no bullshit. There's no nothing. It's just you against you. And I love that aspect, right? Like I think in so many ways, that's what you wish everything would be, is just you against you. And I think that's what's exciting about what the industry's changing to. Is it used to be so gated that it was you against the industry. And now it's becoming you against you. It's almost becoming everything. The internet is democratizing everything so that it can become that. If you have enough drive, you can force it to be you versus you. The only thing holding you back from success is yourself. There's nothing else there. And I think that's such a cool idea. And it's very easily seen in running, but I think that is becoming everything. And I think that's just a mindset. I think people that don't see it like that, they're just in a bad mindset and they just aren't seeing it the right way. And I think once you start looking at the world through that lens, holy fuck, it's your oyster. Like the only thing holding you back is you now. And that's, again, it goes back to that's very exciting. And that's also scary as fuck for people. So it's one of those things where it goes either way. And I've definitely kept you here way longer. I know that the Venmo is going to hit here soon, but I want to just do my little plug on your podcast because
Sure.
I listen to a million and I know comics love compliments, especially face to face. So I'm sure you'll love this, but I listen to a fuck ton of podcasts, right? Like been obsessed probably the last 5 years. I've listened to, 5, 6 a week, long form, short form. And I always really like the long one. So when I saw your podcast was 20 minutes, I was like, oh man, like I usually like them longer. I didn't think I was going to like it. I fucking die on every single one. I love that it's every day because I feel like the reason I don't like shorter ones is I don't get enough. I don't get to know who that person is, but it's 20 minutes, but then it's 20 minutes tomorrow, 20 minutes the next day. And it's just so, and I listen to things on sped up. So 20 minutes is, under 10 for me because I listen to it on 2.5 speed. That's just so far a little check-in. I've listened to 10 episodes today, right? Like I loved it. I'm dog. So like, I'm telling people like, if you're listening and you're hit or miss on podcasts, check it out. It's coming from me. I listen to a fuck ton of podcasts and it is awesome. It is grade A. I wouldn't bullshit you guys. So definitely check it out. Nessing Around. It's on Spotify. Do you put it up on your YouTube page as well? I haven't checked.
Not YouTube. Everything
Not YouTube,
else though.
Everything else. Okay. Apple, Google, all those places. Go fucking check it out. It's awesome. And you got to go watch a special Working Comic. I watched it last night. My girlfriend had to come check on me because I was laughing so hard in this office. She didn't know what was going on. I just told her, I'm so fucking excited to podcast with this guy because this special is awesome. So go check that out. Check out his Instagram. Amazing clips. Like we talked about the kind of the Schultz method. Great production quality. I don't know if you do those yourself. Do you got someone that does them for you? Or is that all you?
It's all me, dog.
Holy fuck. Okay, I might have to ask you a couple more questions off the podcast about how you do that because they look so good. And I think I need to steal a bit about that. But I love everything you do. I'm a huge fan, new fan, but I'm in deep already. And I can't wait to see all the shit you do. So thanks for giving me this opportunity. I had so much fun talking comedy. And I'm sure I'm planning a trip down to do a bunch of podcasts in Calgary at some point in a month or so. And maybe I'll be able to do one in person with you if we can make it happen.
Sounds good to me, man. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks, bro.
It was a blast.
Yes, sir. All right. Talk to you soon. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed recording it. Like I said, really special episode for me. Every time I can record with a comedian, it means a lot to me. And I hope that comes through on the recording. I hope you guys enjoy it. Hope you guys are all doing well. Some really fun episodes coming up. Some more local Slave Lake ones from my hometown. Some more of my buddies coming up. Some more topic specific ones. Have one with a lady from the Alzheimer's Society. That was a really great conversation coming up, and then some friends from university. So kind of a mixture of all the hits coming up in the future, and really special episodes coming. So like I said in the intro, can't say thank you enough for the response I've been getting just of late, and really gets me fired up to bring even more awesome episodes for you guys. So hope you guys are enjoying your week, and hope you guys enjoy your weekend, and yeah, see you guys in the next one. Bye.